Rick C-137 designed the Citadel's entire infrastructure as a trap for the same Ricks he'd spent years murdering across dimensions. Simple Rick, getting strapped to a machine, harvesting his love for his daughter to flavor cookies, became the most dystopian snack food origin ever. And Operation Phoenix, turning into an infinite blender death loop, where Ricks experience thousands of deaths in seconds to fuel evil Morty's escape. And those are just 3 of the absolutely insane Citadel moments in this video. Can you imagine all the messed up stuff there is to uncover when we dive deep into 2 hours of Citadel lore over the next 2 hours? I was certainly shocked by some of the stuff I found when I made this video, so if you're ready to be blown away by what's about to come, sit back, relax, maybe check that your portal gun isn't hacked to open into the blender dimension, and let's begin. Let's start with origins and the peace treaty. So the Citadel of Ricks, this massive space station floating in a pocket dimension, like some kind of interdimensional HOA nobody asked for, was basically built by the one guy who wanted to see every Rick in existence turned into a fine red mist. That's like if Darth Vader designed the Jedi Temple spoiler, it would have better ventilation shafts, or if the Joker got hired as Gotham City planner, honestly, might be an improvement over whatever they've got going on. The whole thing goes exactly as well as you'd think, which is to say absolutely terribly for everyone involved except maybe Rick Cone37, who's playing 4D chess, while everyone else is still trying to figure out which piece is the horse. Let's rewind to Rick Cone37's origin story, which the show kept as a fake memory for 2 whole seasons before season 5 dropped and went, lol. Actually, it was mostly true. Surprise. That's basically the Rick and Morty version of pulling a Shyamalan twist, except it actually worked. There's young Rick in his garage, still rocking that jacket like he's auditioning for a Marty McFly tribute band. Subtle Back to the Future reference there. Justin Roiland would be proud. When another Rick portals in like an interdimensional Jehovah's Witness. This Rick's selling portal technology, which is the ultimate timeshare pitch, except instead of a condo in Cabo, it's literally infinite universes. Every reality you could ever want, every adventure imaginable, complete freedom from boring suburban life. It's the Matrix red pill, but make it science, and also make it way more traumatic. Young Rick looks at his wife Diane, who the show kept hidden for years, because Dan Harmon loves making us wait, looks at his daughter Beth playing in the yard, and pulls the most un-Rick move possible. He says no. He doesn't want infinite universes. He wants this one. The one with his family, the white picket fence life, the whole Norman Rockwell painting deal, where happiness has a half-life of about 30 seconds before everything explodes. That's basically the show's thesis statement right there. Because, of course, a bomb immediately goes off in that garage. Diane and Beth get erased from existence like they were MySpace profiles in 2010. Remember MySpace? No? Good. Neither does Rick. Just gone. Vaporized. Deleted from reality with the efficiency of a canceled Netflix show. Rick Cone37 survives the blast, which is the show's way of saying, congratulations. You get to be traumatized forever, and also become an alcoholic. Here's your complimentary flask. An ambulance shows up. Who called them? How do paramedics even know to respond to an interdimensional bombing? The show doesn't explain this, but what are they gonna do? Prescribe some Tylenol for the gaping hole where your entire family used to be? That's basically like trying to fix the Titanic with duct tape. So Rick does what any genius madman would do when faced with cosmic-level tragedy. He builds the portal gun himself. Not for fun adventures or wacky hijinks or any of the stuff we've been watching for 8 seasons, meta-commentary. We're watching a prequel to the show we've already been watching, very Doctor Who of them. He builds it for revenge. This is John Wick, if John Wick was an alcoholic scientist, and the dog was his entire family. Which honestly makes the murder spree way more justified. Not that I'm keeping score, but if I was, Rick's body count would make the Continental Hotel look like a peaceful retirement home. What follows is basically Rick Cone37's Kill Bill Vol, 1 through infinity. He's hopping dimensions like he's bar hopping, except instead of getting drunk at each stop, okay, he's also doing that. He's getting information and leaving corpses. He's building weapons, playing intergalactic arms dealer to fund his hunt, because revenge doesn't pay for itself. Entrepreneurship, Rick Sanchez style. And most importantly, murdering every alternate version of himself he finds. That's like playing Russian roulette, except every chamber is loaded, and you're also the gun. His detective skills amount to interrogate, then liquidate. Very subtle, very legal, definitely not going to create any problems later. It's the worst possible police lineup where everyone's a suspect, and everyone ends up as a corpse. Very efficient, extremely illegal, Definitely traumatizing for anyone who witnesses it, which is probably why Bird Person needs so much therapy. The montage they show us in Rick Mirai Jack is brutal in that prestige TV way where they speedrun 20 years of trauma in 3 minutes. Emmy-worthy, honestly. We see Rick traveling between dimensions, studying alien flora and fauna, like he's on a really violent nature documentary. David Attenborough would not narrate this. Building the space cruiser, which will eventually have Diane's AI voice, because he's sentimental in the most messed up way possible. That's basically like making Siri sound like your dead wife, which is somehow romantic and creepy simultaneously, and making deals with shady buyers, who sometimes try to backstab him. He hangs out with Bird Person for a while, the show's way of saying, yes, they were friends before the show started. Stop asking. Battles the Galactic Federation, which explains why they hate him so much in Season 2, and continues his dimension-hopping murder spree across infinite realities. It's like if Carmen Sandiego was hunting herself, and also had a body count in the thousands, and also wasn't a kids' show anymore. Here's where it gets depressing, which is saying something because we're already at dead wife and daughter levels of sad. He never finds the right Rick. Years pass, maybe decades, cartoons don't age, so who knows. And Rick Cohn, 3-7 kills, hundreds of Ricks, possibly thousands. Again, the show's vague on numbers, probably to avoid giving PETA ideas, and none of them are his guy. Imagine playing Guess Who, except every wrong answer ends in homicide, and you've been playing for 20 years straight with no wins. That's basically Rick's life, which explains so much about his personality in the actual show. He's become a bitter, lonely, depressed, alcoholic old man, drowning in the blood of his alternate selves. And the irony is, he's become exactly the kind of Rick he started out not being. Very Greek tragedy. Very, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. Very much the kind of thing English teachers would write essays about if they took Rick and Morty seriously. Some of them do. It's weird. Meanwhile, all the surviving Ricks are having a collective panic attack because there's a serial killer version of themselves hunting them down like they're targets in the world's worst video game. Sure, these Ricks are used to being the smartest guy in any room, the apex predator, the one everyone else should fear. Now they're the prey, and they hate it with the intensity of 1,000 suns. So they do what any group of narcissistic geniuses would do when faced with extinction. They form a council. Not because they like each other, Ricks hate other Ricks with a passion usually reserved for their ex-wives or the DMV, but because there's strength in numbers when a genocidal version of you is playing interdimensional whack-a-mole with your skull. That's basically the Avengers forming, except everyone is Iron Man, and also everyone is a dick. The Council of Ricks realizes they have a Cone 3-7 problem, which is like saying the Titanic had an iceberg problem or Jurassic Park had a dinosaur problem. Technically true, but massively understating the situation. They can't kill him because he's already proven he's the final boss of the Rick video game, the Bowser at the end of the castle, except this Bowser has a portal gun and severe PTSD and also drinks. They can't hide forever because infinite dimensions means infinite places to search, and Cone 3-7's got nothing but time and rage, fueling him like the world's worst energy drink. They're basically trapped in a horror movie where the killer is them but angrier, which is a premise Jordan Peele would absolutely steal if he watched cartoons. So they make him an offer that's equal parts genius and cowardice. Join us, or we'll scatter across infinity, and you'll never find Rick Prime. It's psychological warfare, wrapped in a peace treaty, tied with a bow, made of desperation. They're not threatening him with violence, that obviously doesn't work. They're threatening him with futility, with the possibility that he could spend eternity killing Ricks and never get the one he actually wants. They're saying, you can keep killing us, but we'll make sure you never get your revenge. We'll scatter like cockroaches when you turn on the lights. It's the ultimate hostage negotiation, except the hostages are offering to make their own prison just to survive. Think about the twisted logic here. They're so terrified of Cone 3-7 that their survival strategy is, let's all stay in one place where he can find us, but promise he won't kill us. And maybe the guy he's actually looking for will show up eventually. That's like offering to stand in a bear trap as bait, which works great until the bear shows up, and you're still in the trap. Cone 3-7 looks at this offer and does the math. He's a genius. The math takes like 2 seconds. If the Ricks scatter, he's chasing ghosts forever. Rick Prime could be anywhere in infinite universes, Schrodinger's asshole, simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. And every day Cone 3-7 spends hunting. Council Ricks is a day. Rick Prime stays hidden, laughing, probably building death traps. But if all these Ricks stay in one place, that's one less variable to worry about. One less needle in the infinite haystack. Plus, and here's the kicker, if they build something big enough and interesting enough, maybe Rick Prime gets curious. Maybe he shows up to see what all the other Ricks are doing, like a cat that can't resist knocking things off a table. It's playing the long game, setting a trap that could take decades to spring, but it's smarter than wandering the multiverse until heat death, while never finding your target. Very Sisyphus, very existential, very Rick and Morty. So Cone 37 agrees to a peace treaty. Not because he's had a change of heart or found inner peace, this show doesn't do redemption arcs that easily, but because it's tactically sound. This is infiltration tactics straight out of every spy movie ever, except instead of sneaking in disguised as a waiter, very James Bond, he's arriving as the architect. That's basically Mission Impossible, Emotional Damage Edition, starring Rick Cone 37 as Ethan Hunt, if Ethan Hunt was drowning in bourbon and self-loathing. Here's where it gets really twisted in that way the show loves to twist things. Rick Cone 37 doesn't just agree to stop killing them, he agrees to help them build the Citadel. Like, actually designs and constructs it from scratch. This isn't consulting work or a few suggestions scribbled on a napkin. This is full architectural design, engineering, infrastructure planning, the whole 9 yards. The dimensional drive that can teleport the entire station anywhere in the central finite curve. His blueprint will explain the curve later, just know it's important and also incredibly depressing. The portal technology infrastructure that powers everything from doors to garbage disposal. His innovations, his designs, his genius on full display. The pocket dimension location that exists outside normal space-time where nobody can find it unless they know the coordinates. His idea, his execution, his middle finger to traditional physics. He gave them the keys to the safest place in the multiverse while keeping a spare set for himself. Very supervillain energy. Very I'm playing both sides so I always come out on top. The Citadel gets built in this pocket dimension that's not part of any specific reality, just floating there like a cosmic anomaly that physics forgot about. It's accessible from any universe within the central finite curve, through specific coordinates that any Rick can find if they know where to look. Very exclusive club, very you can't sit with us. The central finite curve is basically a fence around certain realities, and Cone 37 understood it better than almost anyone because of course he did. He used that knowledge to build them a sanctuary that doubled as a cage, a home that could also be a tomb if he ever decided to flip the switch. Very gift with purchase. Very the call is coming from inside the house. Here's the hilarious but tragic part that really drives home how messed up this whole situation is. Cone 37 spent years building this thing alongside the exact same Ricks he'd been murdering just months or years before. Can you imagine the cognitive dissonance? The sheer mental gymnastics required to not just stab everyone in the room? Every day he's installing circuit boards next to alternate versions of himself, probably thinking, I was 3 dimensions away from turning you into salsa last Tuesday. Greg, do Ricks have different names? The show never clarifies this. And now they're collaborating on electrical systems like their co-workers on an HGTV renovation show. Every corridor he designed was a mix of architectural genius and crushing shame, because he knew exactly what he was doing. He was building a government, a society, a bureaucracy. Everything Rick Sanchez claims to despise more than authority, more than routine, more than the concept of accountability itself. Every wall he constructed was a monument to his compromise. Every system he installed was proof that he'd traded vengeance for cooperation, that he'd swapped his righteous fury for a construction contract. The other Ricks probably thought he was just being a team player. Ricks don't really do team player, but whatever. Maybe even thought he'd changed. Maybe thought he'd found some kind of zen through urban planning. They had no idea he was seething the entire time, building their sanctuary while planning his eventual exit, designing their systems while fantasizing about the day Rick Prime would walk through those doors so he could finally finish what he started. That's basically like building someone a house while imagining burning it down, except you're contractually obligated to make the house really, really nice first. The Citadel that emerges from all this is genuinely impressive from a technical standpoint, which makes sense because Rick Cone 37 built it, and he's the Rickest Rick. The show tells us this constantly, we get it. Multiple domed districts floating in space, full infrastructure like water and power and interdimensional cable, because even in a pocket dimension you need TV. Space for millions of Ricks and Mortys to live and work and create a functioning society, self-sustaining systems that don't need outside help. It's everything the Council wanted, a place to hide from the Galactic Federation, who are basically the Empire from Star Wars, but with better PR, from their enemies, everyone, From the consequences of being Rick Sanchez, across infinite universes, consequences are for other people. It's Fort Knox, meets the Death Star, meets a gated community, except everyone living there is the same person. The ultimate echo chamber, and I mean that literally, because it's all Ricks talking to Ricks about how smart they are. Very Reddit, very actually, very insufferable. When construction wrapped up, when the last circuit was installed, and the last system went online, and someone probably threw a party that Cone 37 definitely didn't attend, Cone 37 looked at what he'd built and immediately dipped. Just straight up left. Peaced out. Dropped the mic and walked away without even a goodbye or good luck with your bureaucracy or try not to immediately become everything I warned you about. He'd kept his end of the bargain, built their fortress, gave them their safe space, very generous, considering he wanted them dead, fulfilled his contractual obligations, verbal contract, but he wasn't staying. He'd rather take his chances in the multiverse than live in the monument to his own failure. So he bounced back to Rick Prime's dimension, the one where that Rick had lived before killing Cone, 37's family, and then also abandoning them. Bad parenting is apparently genetic. And crashed into that Rick's abandoned family's life like a particularly destructive comet. Breaking and entering, family edition, very crime, much illegal. He found an adult Beth who didn't remember her real father because Rick Prime had ditched her decades ago. A Jerry who's just Jerry, and honestly, probably hasn't changed across any dimension, because Jerry is a universal constant, like death and taxes and mediocrity. A Summer who's a teenager with normal teenager problems like boys and grades, and not, my grandpa is an interdimensional war criminal, and eventually our Morty. Then, he spent the next 15+ years going on adventures while waiting for Rick Prime to show up, living in his enemy's house, raising his enemy's grandkids, becoming the Rick of that universe by default, because the original Rick was off doing whatever Rick Prime does when he's not being terrible. Turns out it's mostly being terrible in other places. 15 years. That's how long Cone 37 lived with the knowledge that somewhere in the multiverse, the Citadel he designed was running exactly as dystopian as he predicted. The Ricks formed a council with 6 members, very oligarchy, who immediately started acting like every corrupt politician in history because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and infinite power corrupts. Infinitely, philosophy, 101, also observable reality. They built a military called SEAL Team Ricks, because even their special forces are just more versions of themselves taking orders, which is both efficient and incredibly weird from an outside perspective. Imagine if the Navy SEALs were all clones of one guy. Actually, don't imagine that. It's disturbing. They created a class system with Ricks at the top and Mortys at the bottom, serving as both camouflage and servants, and punching bags. Very feudalism. Very some animals are more equal than others. Very George Orwell would have things to say. Everything he warned against happened exactly like he said it would, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, except the prophecy was, this will suck, and the fulfillment was, yep, this sucks, and it's all built on blueprints with his signature on them. That's like if an architect designed a prison and then had to watch it become exactly the kind of dehumanizing hellhole they feared, except the architect also almost committed genocide against the prison guards first. The other Ricks living in the Citadel probably don't even realize the cosmic joke they're living in, which makes it funnier in that dark comedy way the show loves. They think they're safe in their fortress, protected from their enemies, living in what they call a democracy, but is really more like an oligarchy, pretending to be a democracy until it becomes a dictatorship. We'll get there later in the video. What they don't know is the guy who built their walls is the same guy who tried to exterminate them. The sanctuary was designed by the executioner. The fortress was constructed by the monster they created by being targets. Every time they walk through a corridor, use a portal, trust in the safety of their coordinates, they're relying on systems built by someone who viewed them as acceptable collateral damage in a personal vendetta. And Rick Prime, the entire reason for this elaborate compromise, the one person Cone 37 actually wanted dead, the MacGuffin driving this entire plot, he never showed up. The Citadel existed for over a decade, and Rick Prime was just somewhere else doing Rick Prime things, probably laughing at how Cone 37 wasted years building a trap that didn't work. The man's entire personality is troll everyone forever, so yeah, he was definitely laughing. So, the Citadel stands as a monument to Rick Cone 37's greatest tactical failure. He murdered his way across dimensions like he was speedrunning a genocide achievement. Very video game logic, very gotta catch 'em all, except it's murder. Failed to find his target despite killing hundreds of alternate selves, and ended up giving all the surviving Ricks exactly what they wanted: safety, community, and a government that would eventually become exactly as corrupt as any other government. Very realistic, very cynical, very Rick and Morty. The entire plan was predicated on Rick Prime being curious enough or arrogant enough to show up, and he just didn't. For 15 years. That's like setting up the world's most elaborate mousetrap, and the mouse just orders DoorDash instead. Every Rick walking through those corridors, using those portal systems, trusting in the safety of their pocket dimension coordinates. The show never explains how these coordinates work. We just accept it, like we accept that the TARDIS is bigger on the inside. They're trusting the design work of their worst nightmare. They're living in a house built by someone who wanted them all dead, following systems designed by someone who viewed them as obstacles between him and revenge. And Cone 37's out there, getting day drunk with a teenager, probably illegal, definitely irresponsible, going on adventures that sometimes involve going inside butts, or fighting pickle versions of himself. Season 3 was weird, and we don't talk about it, pretending none of it happened, still carrying that shame like emotional luggage with no weight limit and no baggage claim, and also the TSA keeps finding weapons in it. The Citadel represents everything Rick Cone 37 hates about himself, which is a lot because Rick has severe self-loathing issues, camouflaged as narcissism. It's a defense mechanism, very psychological. It's his compromise, his surrender, his admission that revenge had limits, and he'd hit them like running into a wall at full speed. It's proof that even the Rickest Rick, the one Rick who supposedly doesn't play by anyone's rules, except when he does, which is often, had to eventually sit down at the negotiating table and make a deal. He traded his murder spree for construction work. He swapped his hunt for architecture. He gave up killing Ricks to help them build a society, betting everything on the slim chance that maybe, someday, possibly, the right Rick would show up. Spoiler alert, he doesn't, not for 15 years. And when he does appear in Season 7's Unmortrican, it's not at the Citadel at all. The whole thing was pointless. The compromise was wasted effort. The peace treaty was a strategic blunder, disguised as a tactical decision. But hey, at least a few million Ricks and Mortys got a place to live out of it, silver lining? Even if that place eventually gets destroyed twice and becomes a refugee camp, we'll get there in later sections. Very small victories. Microscopically small. Basically, non-existent victories. That's how the Citadel was born. Not through vision or hope or any noble ideal about Ricks working together for the greater good. Ricks don't do greater good. They barely do regular good. It was born through a peace treaty signed by a man who'd already signed hundreds of death warrants, built by hands still bloody from a massacre that never found its target, designed by a broken man who thought he could game the system and ended up becoming part of it. It's a fortress built by someone who wanted it destroyed, populated by people who don't know they're living in their own executioner's masterpiece. Very ironic in that Greek tragedy way. Governed by a council that thinks they're in charge, when really, they're just living in Cone 37's elaborate waiting room that he abandoned after realizing the person he was waiting for would never show up. Welcome to the Citadel of Ricks, built by the one Rick who wishes everyone in it was dead, including himself. Every corridor is a reminder of compromise. Every system is proof of failure. Every wall stands as testament to the fact that even the smartest man in infinite universes can't outsmart grief, can't engineer his way out of trauma, can't build a trap sophisticated enough to catch the one person he actually wants. And Cone 37 knows this. He's known it for 15 years. He's just been getting drunk and taking a teenager on adventures to avoid thinking about it, which is basically the most Rick Sanchez coping mechanism imaginable. Very healthy, very well adjusted, definitely not going to explode into a massive character crisis later in the series. It absolutely does, multiple times. The Council and Military Complex. After C-137 built the Citadel and immediately ditched it, the surviving Ricks needed someone to actually run the place. Their solution? Form a council of 6 Ricks to govern millions of other Ricks. That's like putting 6 versions of Tony Stark in charge of the Avengers and expecting them not to argue about who has the better suit design for 2 hours straight. Meet your overlords. Rick 4 serves as the council spokesman, basically the head, Rick who does all the talking when they need to pretend they're democratic. Rick Prime sits on it too, which is hilarious because he's literally the guy who killed C-137's family, and nobody knows yet. There's Quantum Rick making physics puns nobody laughs at. Maximums. Rickamus sounds like someone's D&D character after one Latin class. Zeta Alpha Rick went to a frat party once and never emotionally recovered. Rictiminus Sanchez Aminius is just syllables at this point. And yes, these are their actual names. which tells you everything about how seriously these guys take governing. The council chambers look like someone watched Star Wars and said, make it more intimidating, but also more bureaucratic. Raised platforms tower over everyone, because height equals authority in primate politics. Holographic displays show evidence like they're on CSI. Stadium seating lets crowds of Ricks gather and boo on command. The whole design screams, we're important and you're not, which is peak insecurity architecture. It's the interdimensional equivalent of buying a lifted truck to compensate for something. In close Rick counters of the Rick kind, we get our first real look at how this government operates, and spoiler alert, it's terrible. C-137 gets arrested for allegedly murdering 27 Ricks across different timelines. That's a serial killer case, except the victims are all also the detective, which makes this the weirdest Law & Order episode ever pitched. 3 armed Ricks portal into the Smith family breakfast, ruining Beth's anniversary pancakes. The real crime here is interrupting flying saucer-shaped pancakes, but nobody asks my opinion on culinary priorities. They announce C-137 is under arrest and freeze Jerry mid-sentence while he's offering them his R2-D2 coin collection. Jerry thinks limited edition Star Wars quarters will stop armed interdimensional police. That's like offering monopoly money to the IRS and expecting them to accept it because hotels on Boardwalk are technically valuable. The man's crisis management skills involve offering his childhood collectibles to people with guns. Beth married this guy. Voluntarily. The arrest involves 0 explanations or rights being read. Just guns and authority. Like getting swatted, except the SWAT team looks exactly like you and actually has a warrant. When C-137 demands they leave Morty out of it, the council Rick drops this line. You lost the right to have a say in these things when you refused to join the council. Translation. You didn't join our club, so we own you now. That's middle school cafeteria politics with interdimensional jurisdiction. One of the armed Ricks tells another to neutralize the Jerry, which is both hilarious and terrifying as phrasing. Jerry gets frozen mid-panic, mouth open, probably mid-thought about those coins. When Beth asks what about Jerry, C-137 has to specifically request they unfreeze my daughter's idiot, which is how he refers to his son-in-law. They do unfreeze him, and Jerry immediately continues his sentence about giving them anything, mentioning the coins weren't antique, but were a limited minting. Nobody cares about your coins, Jerry. Read the room. They drag C-137 and Morty to the Citadel through a portal. First thing Morty sees is the massive space station and asks, what is this place? C-137 explains, the Citadel of Ricks. It's the secret headquarters for the Council of Ricks. He goes on to explain that as the smartest man in the universe, he's got enemies everywhere. Galactic terrorists, subgalactic dictators, most of the entire intergalactic government. Wherever you find people with heads up their asses, someone wants a piece of your grandpa. Here's the kicker. A lot of versions of me on different timelines had the same problem. So a few thousand versions of me had the ingenious idea of banding together like a herd of cattle or a school of fish, or those people who answer questions on Yahoo Answers. That last comparison is brutal. He's comparing the council to Yahoo Answers users, which in 2014, when this aired, was already a punchline. Yahoo Answers, where the questions are made up and the answers don't matter. The marketplace is capitalism meets narcissism. Vendors everywhere selling Rick and Morty merchandise to other Ricks and Mortys. One Rick hawks Morty dazzlers, which the show never explains. We just accept that bedazzling your grandson is apparently a market here. Turn your boring old Morty into a hot fashion statement. Another Rick holds up a Morty doll that says, "Show me the Morty," when pressed, which is a Jerry Maguire reference nobody asked for in 2014. Insurance Ricks try to sell Morty insurance. Excuse me, sir, is your Morty insured? You know, every year hundreds of Mortys are injured. C-137 cuts him off with, back off. Not my cup of tea, this place. But think about the implications. There's actuarial data on grandson mortality rates. Somewhere in the Citadel, an accountant Rick runs spreadsheets, calculating premiums based on which Rick owns which Morty. That's capitalism quantifying child endangerment in Excel. The whole place feels like Comic-Con if everyone was you. Morty spots a cowboy Morty and gets excited. Rick responds, geez, you're easy to impress. Then explains, most timelines have a Rick, and most Ricks have a Morty. This place is a real who's who of who's you and me. That's philosophy disguised as a joke. Identity becomes meaningless when infinite versions exist. Walking to the council chambers, Rick explains his position. I say the point of being a Rick is being a Rick. The guard responds, Save your anti-Rick speech for the Council of Ricks. Terror Rick. So they've given him a terrorist designation. Terror Rick. Like he's on some kind of interdimensional no-fly list. C-137 fires back. Hey, save your Rick rules for the sheep Ricks. Rick Pig. The guard says, fuck me, pal. C-137 responds, fuck you? No, fuck me. It's aggressive politeness as an insult. Very Canadian passive-aggressive energy. They reach the council chambers, and the doors open automatically. Very Star Trek sliding doors. Very, we've got the budget for automated entrances. Reek 4, the head council member, immediately brings up holograms, showing the dead Ricks. 27 Ricks brutally murdered in their own timelines. An unprecedented Rick-icidal epidemic. Rick-icidal. They've created legal terminology for killing yourself across dimensions. That's new case law. What say you, Earth Rick C-137? C-137 responds, you think I did this? Why am I the first Rick you pull in every time a Rick stubs his toe? Fair question. They're profiling themselves. That's like if cops arrested someone for looking suspicious, except the cops look exactly like the suspect because they are the suspect in different timelines. The council explains, you have a history of non-cooperation with the council. When C-137 asks why the scientist formerly known as Rick isn't there in handcuffs, amazing name, Very Prince, they reveal, because he's dead too. The crowd gasps, in perfect unison. Very soap opera, very Days of Our Lives level drama. Someone in that crowd definitely whispered, not the scientist, formerly known as Rick. Then Rick 4 drops the profile. Who else would you have us question? You fit the profile. Of all the Ricks in the central finite curve, you're the malcontent, the rogue. So they've created a hierarchy of Rickness, ranking themselves on how Rick they are. It's narcissism eating itself. They're discriminating based on a scale of themselves. C-137 delivers his legendary speech. I'm the Rick, and so were the rest of you before you formed this stupid alliance. You wanted to be safe from the government, so you became a stupid government. That makes every Rick here less Rick than me. The crowd murmurs angrily, because being called out by a better version of yourself hits different than regular criticism. This is you telling yourself you've sold out, which is impossible to defend against. He continues, talking about his pancakes. I've got pancakes back home with syrup on top of them. They're about to hit that critical point of syrup absorption that turns the cakes into a gross paste. And I hate to get all Andy Rooney about it, but I think we all like fluffy discs of cake with syrup on top. Andy Rooney was the 60 Minutes commentator who complained about mundane things. So, Rick's making a cultural reference while complaining about breakfast during his murder trial. Priorities. And I think we also like to be accused of crimes when there's evidence. The council member responds, evidence? Good idea. Which is insane because shouldn't evidence be the starting point, not an afterthought? They were going to convict based purely on vibes and non-cooperation. They scan his portal gun. One guard reaches into C-137's coat and pulls it out. Rick objects. Oh, come on. Don't look at another man's portal gun history. We all go to weird places. But the scan reveals he visited every murder location. The hologram shows his travel history. Dimensions flashing green for normal travel, then specific coordinates flashing red for murder scenes. Perfect frame-up, courtesy of evil Morty controlling evil Rick, but that reveal comes later. Reek 4 announces the sentence, Earth Rick C-137. The Council of Rick sentences you to the machine of unspeakable doom, which swaps your conscious and unconscious minds, rendering your fantasies pointless, while everything you know becomes impossible to grasp. Also, every 10 seconds it stabs your balls. Let's break down this torture device because it deserves analysis. The psychological component, swapping conscious and unconscious minds, means dreams become reality and reality becomes dreams. Everything you know becomes impossible to understand. That's existential horror, identity death, complete dissolution of self. And then every 10 seconds it stabs your balls. That's a bonus feature. Someone invented this, presented it to the council, and everyone agreed it was a good addition. There was a meeting where someone said, what if we add ball stabbing every 10 seconds? And 5 other Ricks nodded approvingly. C-137 responds, I've heard enough. Which is both a great action movie line and completely reasonable because who wants to hear more about the ball stabbing machine? He elbows the guard, tackles him into another guard, steals the gun, and shoots through his own handcuffs and Morty's. Run, Morty. A random Morty from the crowd starts running too. A nearby Rick grabs him. Not you. Even in chaos, they maintain crowd control. The chase sequence shows the Citadel's infrastructure. long corridors with identical brutalist architecture. C-137 shoots portals into walls that release fire, insects, tentacles, and falling pumpkins onto his pursuers. One Rick gets set on fire, another gets attacked by insects. A third gets dragged into a portal by tentacles. 2 more get hit by falling pumpkins, which is both absurd and effective. That's Home Alone tactics with interdimensional weapons. They reach a movable ramp that's down and blocked by railing. They jump over. C-137 shoots a portal beneath them as they fall, and they drop through into Butt World. Everything is butts. They land on a butt mountain. The show commits completely to this bit. No half measures. They bounce off butts and keep running, shooting another portal between butt cheeks. The pursuing Ricks follow them through. Next dimension, pizza dimension. A pizza sits on a couch dialing a phone, calling another pizza lying on another couch. Yeah, I'd like to order 1 large person with extra people, please. White people. No. Black people. And Hispanic on half. It's a reversal gag that also somehow comments on how we order pizza, making race-based topping decisions sound ridiculous by having pizzas do it. They portal through to Greasy Grandma World. A banner says, "Welcome to Greasy Grandma World. Population, a whole lot, sonny." The dimension is filled with greasy grandmas. No explanation for why they're greasy or why there's a whole world of them. We just accept it and move on. Phone dimension reverses the pizza dimension. A phone sits on a pizza calling another phone. Yes, I'd like to order 1 large sofa chair with extra chair, please. High chair. No, recliner. And wheelchair on half. The show commits to symmetry, doing the same joke backwards. Doopadoo dimension. Creatures just repeat doopadoo endlessly. C-137 shoots multiple portals here and goes through the last one. The pursuing Ricks stand confused. They could have gone into any one of these. First time we see council forces actually stumped. When everyone thinks identically, creative evasion becomes impossible to predict. They end up in chair dimension. Chairs sit on people dialing phones. C-137 and Morty hide in a restaurant. A chair waiter brings them phones a la clams and phones Getty with phone balls. Anything else? Rick orders more phone sticks. While eating, Morty tries to find meaning in their relationship, saying their bond must be special to span timelines. Rick responds with the camouflage revelation. Ricks have a very distinct and traceable brainwave due to our genius. The best way to hide from an enemy's radar is to stand near someone with complementary brainwaves that makes ours invisible. When a Rick is with a Morty, the genius waves get cancelled out by the Morty waves. Morty tries to salvage this. Because our personalities are so different? Rick completely ignores the question because the real answer is, no. It's because you're dumb enough to cancel out my smart. That's cold. Mortys aren't companions or family or sidekicks. They're human cloaking devices. Walking, talking, sentient camouflage. Your grandson's entire purpose is making you invisible to people trying to kill you. 2 council Ricks enter the restaurant. One says, "Excuse me, we've tracked a pair of dangerous criminals to this exact location. They look exactly like us, so in order to avoid confusion, I'm going to mark us each with a red X right now." He draws red X's on himself and his partner. That's actually competent police procedure. If everyone looks identical, mark the good guys to prevent friendly fire. They rush toward 2 chair people that look like Rick and Morty from behind, but it's a fake out. They look out the window to see C-137 flipping them off from a stolen police hovercraft. The chair waiter comes out. "Hey, you didn't pay your bill." Red X Rick points to his chest. The red X? Red X. Like his marker drawing somehow transfers financial responsibility. Now they're flying over a green planet. Rick mentions they bought lab coats and Morty's favorite shirt at a space outlet, which raises questions about interdimensional retail nobody answers. There's a Gap somewhere that sells Rick lab coats across dimensions. The supply chain logistics must be insane. Rick says, "Man, this place is way off the grid. This guy does not want to be found." Morty asks, "Well, if he's a Rick, doesn't he just have to stand by a Morty to hide?" Rick responds, "Morty, you're making a bigger deal out of this than it is." Then Morty spots a dome covered in tortured Mortys in the distance. They're all screaming. As they get closer, it's revealed the dome is completely covered, top to bottom, in hundreds of naked Mortys strapped to the surface with contraptions stabbing them constantly. Morty reacts, "Oh my god, why would somebody do this? It's horrible." Rick explains, "Well, one Morty's enough to hide from the bureaucrats, but you get a whole matrix of Mortys and put them in agonizing pain that creates a pattern that can hide even from other Ricks, motherfucker." Then he admits, I fiddled with a concept like this once. Morty stares in horror. On paper, Morty, on paper, I wouldn't do this. It's barbaric overkill. I mean, you could accomplish the same result with like 5 Mortys and a jumper cable. Morty glares harder. Which I also wouldn't do. I'm just saying, it's bad craftsmanship. So Rick's objection isn't ethics, it's inefficiency. You don't need hundreds of tortured Mortys when 5 would work. That's like criticizing someone for using a nuclear bomb to kill a spider. Technically effective, but shows poor engineering judgment. They land and enter the dome. Evil Rick slow claps at them. Ooh, look at you, C137. Aren't you a tough customer? C137 responds. The slow clap? Really? Kinda played out, dude. Evil Rick says. Not in this dimension, it isn't. In fact, I invented it, and nobody else has ever even done it here before. He's proud of inventing the slow clap in his dimension. That's the pettiest possible accomplishment. C137 slow claps back sarcastically. Hey, that's mine. Evil Rick is genuinely offended about slow clap theft. They get captured by lobster aliens. Evil Rick reveals his plan. Download C137's brain, then kill him. While doing this, he plays C137's memories on a screen, and they're all memories of Morty. C137 tears up. Evil Rick notices. You're crying? Over a Morty? Like showing emotion for your grandson is weakness. We both know that if there's any truth in the universe, it's that Ricks don't care about Mortys. That's the ideology. What all Ricks believe, or claim to believe, or believe they should believe. Evil Morty takes C137's Morty to a room full of scared, shivering Mortys and locks him in. C137's Morty gives an inspiring speech. All right, Mortys, listen up. My name is Morty Smith, from Earth Dimension C137. I know you're scared, because I'm scared, but that's no reason to accept our fate. We're Mortys. We're not defined by our relationships to Rick. Our destiny is our own. The religious Mortys, who worship the one true Morty and have a pamphlet called The Good Morty, decide C137's Morty is that prophesied figure. One Morty says, I'm sick of being a human shield. I want to be a gardener. Another wants to write intense action novels. Hammer Morty announces, I'm more than just a hammer. When a lobster guard checks on them, all the Mortys rush him and break free. They overrun Evil Rick, tearing him apart while he shouts, do your worst, you little bastards. Kill me. Do it. C137's Morty unbuckles Rick from the examination table. You're lucky I'm not a Rick. Rick responds, point taken, but this is no time for arcs. He presses a button, releasing all the Mortys from the dome shield. They pour down like water. Rick calls home on a phone, and a council. Rick answers. Yeah, hello? Rick says, hey, what do me and OJ not have in common? Huh? Who is this? I found the real killer by itch. Get over here. Back on Earth, Jerry and Doofus Rick are playing with Legos. Doofus Rick gets called to leave by the other Ricks. Jerry suggests maybe getting rid of regular Rick. I'm not saying kill him necessarily. I'm also not saying necessarily not kill him. Doofus Rick gently refuses. Jerry, we both know it wouldn't work. It's time to go back to our lives. I love you, Jerry. I love ya. They hug. Jerry makes like, he'll follow, stops, punches a wall. The Lego castle they built collapses. At Evil Rick's lair, the council investigates. Rick 4 says, Earth Rick C137. The council apologizes for its false accusation. And in the way of reparations for our terrible mistake, we would like to compensate you with this voucher for a free replacement Morty, in the event that your current Morty should. Rick cuts him off. Guys, not a good time. Come on, Morty, let's hit it. But he takes the voucher anyway because free stuff is free stuff. Walking away, Morty tries to get acknowledgement. Is it time for arcs yet, Rick? I did a pretty great job back there for a human cloaking device. Saved your ass, Rick responds. All right, Morty, don't break an arm, jerking yourself off. Morty gets frustrated about Rick not showing humanity or connecting. Rick explains, hey Morty, you want connection? Go be part of some stupid club like all those dumb Ricks. You know, maybe I don't connect because I'm the Rickest Rick there is. And you know, it would go without saying that the Rickest Rick would have the Mortiest Morty. It would go without saying, huh? Yeah, it would. Did you hear me say it? Morty mutters to himself, the Mortiest Morty. Rick warns him, just don't get too big for your loafers, Buster Brown. A cocky Morty could lead to some big problems. Could be a real bad thing for everybody. Morty asks how. I'll explain when you're older. Foreshadowing for Evil Morty's entire arc. Back at the crime scene, Ricks inspect Evil Rick's corpse. What a mess. Pride cometh before the fall. I guess he got what he deserved. Then one notices wires. What is that? They turn evil Rick's head to reveal electronics. They remove the top of his skull to find circuitry woven into his brain and pull out a chip. My God, I've seen this technology before. This Rick was being controlled remotely, puppeteered by somebody else. This is the receiver. Another asks. Yeah, but where's the transmitter? Final scene. Morty's being loaded onto spaceships to return home. Evil Morty removes his eye patch, revealing the transmitter. He crushes it underfoot, hides the wires, and follows the other Mortys. For the Damaged Coda by Blonde Redhead plays. Coldest ending in television. A Morty outsmarted every Rick in the Citadel, framed C-137, murdered 27 Ricks, and walked away undetected. Now let's talk about what this reveals about the military structure. The Council has armed forces, Rick soldiers in uniform carrying weapons, taking orders from other Ricks, despite being identical in intelligence and ego. They're called the Citadel's militia. There's also SEAL Team Ricks, an elite special forces unit. According to the Council's own admission in later events, SEAL Team Ricks consists of 5 Ricks trained for the toughest security tasks and assassination missions. Think about the psychology. Ricks taking orders from other Ricks. Every Rick values independence above all else, yet here they are following commands, wearing uniforms, maintaining chain of command. That's selling out, except you're selling out to yourself. They've compartmentalized their anarchist philosophy for survival, which is either impressive discipline or horrifying brainwashing, depending on perspective. The military exists to protect the Citadel from external threats like the Galactic Federation, which hunts Ricks across the galaxy as wanted criminals. Ricks destabilize governments, sell weapons to all sides, act like chaos agents with PhDs. The Federation wants them imprisoned or dead, which justifies the Citadel's existence as a hiding place. If space Nazis are hunting you with unlimited resources, building a space fortress makes sense. But the military also enforces internal control. They arrest dissidents like C-137. They maintain order through threat of violence. That's every authoritarian government ever, except with portal guns. The military doesn't just protect from outside threats, it suppresses internal opposition. The Council is authorized to kill Ricks who threaten them. Not arrest, not trial, just execution. C-137 threatens them by existing, by being competent, by refusing to submit. The Council runs a protection racket. Join us, or you're a threat. That's pure mafia logic, Godfather, but with interdimensional jurisdiction. The legal system is theater. Trials happen, but verdicts are predetermined. Evidence exists, but can be fabricated. Juries of Ricks all think the same way, defeating the entire purpose of juries. Democracy cosplay, hitting aesthetic notes while missing the actual point. North Korea calls itself democratic too. Anti-Rick activists exist within the Citadel. Ricks who oppose the Council but can't leave because where would they go? The Federation wants them dead. Other dimensions are dangerous. The Citadel is a prison disguised as sanctuary. Everyone knows it, stays anyway, because the alternative is worse. Like staying in a terrible job for health insurance. The scientist, formerly known as Rick, rejected his identity, tried becoming something else. That's Prince, changing his name to a symbol. Radical rejection of assigned identity. The Council hated him because his existence proved you could be Rick without being Rick, threatening their whole philosophy. Then he conveniently died. Suspicious timing, no investigation, case closed. The core contradiction. Every Rick values freedom but submits to the Council. Every Rick hates authority but built a government. Every Rick thinks he's special but follows the same rules. C-137 calls it out, and he's right. Joining the system betrayed core Rick principles. They traded freedom for safety and got neither. That's Benjamin Franklin's quote about liberty and security, except a cartoon is making the point better than textbooks. The Council responds to criticism by tightening control. When someone points out hypocrisy, authoritarians crack down harder. More rules, more enforcement, more bureaucracy. Makes the Citadel less free and more dystopian, proving C-137's point, which they ignore because admitting error isn't in their programming. Doofus Rick appears as the perfect foil, considered the worst Rick because he's genuinely nice, makes ovenless brownies with Jerry and enjoys it, shows interest in Jerry's advertising career, asks real questions, listens to answers. Other Ricks mock him constantly, say he eats poop. He doesn't. They're just cruel, because his kindness threatens their worldview. If you can be Rick and be nice, then being terrible is a choice, which means accepting responsibility, which means the bad things they've done are their fault. which means they're not victims, but active participants in their own misery. That's too much self-awareness for most Ricks, so they mock Doofus Rick instead. Shoot the messenger, discredit the alternative, maintain the status quo of mutual suffering. When Doofus Rick leaves, Jerry genuinely considers murder to keep him around, showing how starved Jerry is for positive male friendship. That's commentary on male loneliness that hits harder than expected from a show about an alcoholic scientist and his grandson. The council took everything Rick claims to hate, government and authority and hierarchy and conformity and rules, and built a society from it, then called it freedom. That's Newspeak, Ministry of Truth logic. War is peace, slavery is freedom, oppression is safety. 6 anarchists created fascism. Millions accepted it because death was the alternative. C137 watches from outside, knowing his designs enable every abuse of power that follows. Every corridor where armed Ricks patrol, every cell holding dissidents, every system maintaining control, his engineering, his architecture, his infrastructure. He gave them the tools, they built the machine, and now it runs on his blueprint while doing everything he warned against. That's the eternal question of whether inventors are responsible for how their inventions get used, except the inventor is watching in real time as his creation becomes exactly what he feared. Now let's talk about the life inside the Citadel, but before that, subscribe to our channel. The Citadel houses millions of Ricks and Mortys from across the central finite curve, all living in a pocket dimension that's basically a really depressing shopping mall that never closes. In the Ricklantis mix-up, Rick C137 mentions that anyone still exploring the Citadel is either stupid or one of the unfortunate millions held hostage by their terrible ideas. It's like being trapped at a family reunion that lasts forever, except everyone at the reunion is you, and also you hate yourself. The episode opens with Rick and Morty K22 collecting donations for the Citadel's redevelopment fund after C137 teleported the entire station into a Federation prison and got a bunch of people killed. They're doing disaster relief fundraising for a disaster that C137 caused. Morty K22 tries to continue his pitch, but his Rick cuts him off. You're pitching the policeman's ball to a black teenager here. Regular Morty wonders what life is like there. C137 responds while strapping on a harpoon gun. Well, you can keep wondering that while we go on our fun, fresh, self-contained adventure to Atlantis. The show's winking at us going, yeah, we're about to ignore what we promised and do a Citadel episode instead. Cut to the Citadel still under construction. In the City by Joe Walsh plays song about urban alienation, perfect for a metropolis populated entirely by 2 people. Damaged buildings everywhere, construction crews rebuilding, Ricks in hard hats doing manual labor. The whole place looks like Detroit in 2008 meets Blade Runner. Let's start with Simple Rick, whose story is, what if Willy Wonka was a dystopian nightmare? There's a commercial playing on Citadel Morning News explaining Simple Rick exists 16 iterations off the central finite curve, meaning he's significantly different from standard Ricks. He works with wood instead of science, very Bob Vila energy. The narrator explains, he realized long ago that the greatest thing he'd ever create was his daughter. We see home video of Simple Rick filming young Beth blowing out birthday candles. She says, I love Daddy, and he cries happy tears. Then the commercial reveals, we captured that moment and run it on a loop through Simple Rick's mind. Present-day Simple Rick is strapped in a chair at the wafer cookie factory, helmet playing that birthday memory forever. Machinery harvests the brain chemicals his mind produces, experiencing that joy. Those chemicals go into every Simple Rick's simple wafer cookie. The tagline, come home to the impossible flavor of your own completion. That's the Matrix, except using one specific human as a happiness battery. They're farming a man's love for his daughter and putting it in cookies, like if Oreo's secret ingredient was Mr. Rogers' brain juice. The slogan, impossible flavor of your own completion, is philosophy meets snack food marketing. The factory employs hundreds of worker Ricks on assembly lines. Rick J. 22 stamps wafer cookies for 15 years. He tells us this later. The smartest man in the universe doing factory work, very hiring Stephen Hawking to alphabetize spice racks. His supervisor gets promoted and quits. The position opens up. Rick J. 22 looks hopeful, but the job goes to Cool Rick, who just arrived. Cool Rick swaggers up. I know I'm new, but what can I say? I'm Cool Rick, then does finger guns. That's nepotism meets startup culture. Very the CEO's son just became your boss. Meanwhile, there's a presidential debate. The Citadel is transitioning to democracy after C137 murdered the council. 5 Rick candidates are running plus candidate Morty. The Rick candidates are retired General Rick Platform, more lasers, juggling Rick, literally juggles, while explaining economic policy, and others. News anchors mock candidate Morty. Here you see him in his little Morty suit, waving. Isn't that adorable? Little jackass. Candidate Morty gives a speech about inequality. Schools teaching Mortys they're all the same to suppress uniqueness. Streets giving guns to Mortys so they fight each other instead of injustice. And factories where Ricks work for fractions of their boss's salary, despite being identical with the same IQ. While he's saying this factory line, Rick J. 22 watches on TV in his supervisor's office. He snaps, grabs machinery, shoots his supervisor dead, runs to the flavor core where Simple Rick sits. Rick J. 22 locks himself in with Simple Rick, creates a force field, takes him hostage. Police surround the building. He shouts, "Your life is a lie, man. All your lives are lies. They told us we were special because we were Ricks, but they stripped us of anything that made us unique." He demands a portal gun, unregistered, untraceable, with enough fluid to take me off this goddamn prison. The Citadel is a prison. These people can't leave. Police send a portal gun through a mini portal. Rick J. 22 grabs it, shuts down Simple Rick's machine. Simple Rick wakes confused, mumbling about his daughter. Rick J. 22 says, "You're going to a better place soon." Shoots a portal, pushes him through. Simple Rick explodes into blood. The portal led to the blender dimension. Rick J. 22 screams, "That's the oldest trick in the book." He tried saving someone and accidentally murdered them. Very Greek tragedy. Rick D. Sanchez III arrives, owner of the factory, dressed like Willy Wonka, meets a mob boss, purple suit, top hat, gold cane. He gives an inspiring speech about how the Citadel was founded for Ricks to be free, asks how long Rick J. 22 worked there, 15 years, then declares, "What the hell have we become? Whatever time you were going to make him serve, he served it. Come with me, friend, to your new life." They walk through the factory. All workers cheer for Rick J. 22. The music swells. He's crying tears of joy, waving at co-workers. It's triumphant, uplifting. Rick D. Sanchez III leads him outside to a fancy hover convertible, hands him the keys. Rick J. 22 reaches for the car. Rick D. Sanchez III shoots him in the back of the head. Cut to Rick J. 22 as the new Simple Rick, hooked to machines, living that moment forever. The narrator explains they're harvesting his taste of freedom for Freedom Wafer Selects. The commercial ends. Come home to the unique flavor of shattering the grand illusion. They're selling the taste of revolution. Your rebellion is now a snack flavor. Very Che Guevara on a t-shirt. Now, Cop Rick and Cop Morty. Basically training day except everyone's the same person. Cop Rick just graduated from the academy, idealistic, by the book. His partner, Cop Morty, who pulls up almost hitting two Mortys at a Morty Pride parade. Cop Rick, "Oh, sorry, I was expecting." Cop Morty interrupts. "A Rick partner? Lesson 1, rookie. Expect the unexpected." They drive through the parade. A Morty jumps on their hood, yelling, "Mortys are human." Cop Morty yells, "Get the fuck off the car, you rickless fucking animal," and tasers him through the car. The Morty falls, screaming. Cop Morty explains, "The elections got these yellow shirts more riled up than a picture day, Jessica." Cop Rick, "That's pretty harsh, sir." Cop Morty, "So report me. Nobody gives a fuck." Cop Rick tries connecting. "Makes me a little sad to hear a Morty cop calling Mortys animals." Cop Morty, "Makes me sad to see another Rick cop buying into sensitivity training. There was a previous partner who thought like Cop Rick." When asked about other cops like him, Cop Morty gestures to the empty seat. There was one. "Why do you think that seat was empty?" They investigate a robbery at Morty Mart. 4 Mortys in yellow shirts rob the place. Cop Morty approaches 2 street Mortys spray painting an alley. Code switches to Morty speak. "Aw geez. Hey, what's going on, fellas?" They chat. One Morty says, "Maybe the uniform makes a big difference. To me, you just look like a sidekick." Cop Morty snaps, pins the Morty to the wall, shoves a gun in his mouth. "Call me a sidekick one more time." That's Dave Chappelle's Clayton Bigsby sketch, self-loathing weaponized into brutality. The other Morty panics, reveals the robbers were the Mortytown Locos. They raid the Locos' hideout, a drug lab where Bootleg Rick manufactures illegal portal fluid, Breaking Bad, except interdimensional travel. Bootleg Rick tries escaping through a portal and disintegrates because his math was off. During the bust, Cop Rick encounters a crying Morty in a bedroom. He lowers his gun. "It's okay, Morty." The Morty pulls a knife, stabs Cop Rick in the shoulder. It's Psychopath Morty, designed to kill. Cop Rick shoots him in self-defense. Cop Morty runs in, helps Cop Rick up. Cop Rick says, "You were right. Everything I learned in the academy was..." Cop Morty cuts him off. "It doesn't matter. Nothing's wrong with putting your faith in a Morty. You just gotta pick the right one." Cop Rick notices there's a crib in the room. Why? Cop Morty explains, "Just something they do to make you feel bad. Psychological warfare from teenagers." Cop Rick goes to get a medipack. Cop Morty says, "Let me worry about this," referring to arrested locos. Cop Rick leaves. The building explodes in a green blast. All Mortys inside die. Cop Morty walks out like nothing happened. Cop Rick asks, "What happened?" Cop Morty, "Same old story. Mortys killing Mortys. Except Cop Morty murdered the prisoners to cover evidence." Later, Cop Morty takes Cop Rick to a strip club called The Creepy Morty, where fully clothed Mortys dance for Ricks. The show wisely doesn't draw naked 14-year-olds. They meet Big Morty, a crime boss with 2 Morty bouncers. Big Morty hands Cop Morty an envelope full of cash. Cop Morty explains to Cop Rick, "Big Morty likes to contribute to keeping peace in Mortytown. Think of him as a drug lord, and us as cops on his payroll." Cop Rick refuses the money. Big Morty mentions, "That's what you said about your last partner," revealing Cop Morty killed him too. Cop Rick tries arresting Big Morty. Shootout. Both bouncers die. Cop Rick aims at Cop Morty, who's got a gun to Big Morty's head. Cop Rick, "If we don't kill him, he'll talk." Cop Morty, "If you do, I'll talk." Cop Rick gives a speech. "You told me to put faith in the right Morty. I got faith in you, partner. Do the right thing." Cop Morty starts crying. "Oh, Grandpa Rick, I don't want to be on the Citadel anymore. I want to be a regular kid. I want to go to school and throw balls around and masturbate. That's manipulation. Performative vulnerability." Cop Rick lowers his gun. Cop Morty immediately shoots Big Morty. Cop Rick shoots Cop Morty before he can turn the gun around. Cop Rick walks outside, surrenders to police. Asked what happened, he says, "Same old story. Rick's killing Mortys." He arrived idealistic, left broken after killing his partner, and realizing the system is unfixable. Meanwhile, 4 Mortys attend school, where teacher Rick makes them practice obedience. "Good idea, Rick. This is a great adventure. I love being your new Morty." It's dog training disguised as education. Slick Morty acts out, substitutes Farty instead of Morty. Teacher Rick punishes him by mentioning Slick's had 5 Ricks die already, making him top of the class in something. Slick, Lizard Morty, Glasses Morty, and Fat Morty sneak out to find the wishing portal, a mythical place where Mortys can make wishes. They steal a mega fruit from Farmer Rick, who yells, "I don't wear this dangnap hat and commit to this rural character so you can eat for free while you come of age." Incredible meta-commentary. They camp in the woods. Slick reveals he's got a trauma implant, a barcode on his stomach marking him as experimental. "I'm part of an experimental line of Mortys with a trauma implant. How do you think it feels to know that no matter where I go, I'll always be the one that makes everybody sad and a little bored?" That's Blade Runner level manufactured identity crisis. Glasses Morty consoles him. They hug. Then they continue to the wishing portal. It's in an abandoned building, a giant green tunnel descending into darkness. Fat Morty throws in his panini maker, wishes for 1,000,000 sandwiches. Lizard Morty tosses his surfer necklace. Glasses Morty throws in a candy bar, wishes incest porn had more mainstream appeal for a friend of mine. Slick gives a speech. "None of those things are gonna happen. Morty wishes never come true, not on the Citadel, because I wish that would change. I wish anything about this life would change." He throws himself into the portal. The other Mortys scream. Slick falls into blackness and vanishes. Beat of silence. Glasses Morty. Maybe he went somewhere nice. PA announcement. Garbage dump. Stand back. 3 pipes dump loads of garbage into the portal. The wishing portal is a garbage chute. The Citadel uses it for interdimensional trash disposal and lets Mortys believe it's magic. Hope weaponized as waste management. Slick didn't go somewhere nice. He landed in garbage and probably died on impact. The 3 surviving Mortys return to school. Teacher Rick's locking up, tells them there's no graduation, no new Ricks. Curriculum is changing to what? He doesn't know. He's fired. Lizard Morty. Holy crap, Slick's wish came true because the system changed after Slick died. They smile, believing his sacrifice mattered. The audience knows different. Slick died in garbage, and the system changed for unrelated political reasons. President Morty reforming education. Let's talk about the election. Candidate Morty wins after his debate speech goes viral. Campaign manager Morty initially wanted to quit, but after the performance, they're winning. Candidate Morty fires. Campaign manager Morty. That's why you're fired. Campaign manager Morty ends up at a bar where investigator Rick, dressed like a film noir detective, slides him a dossier. It's secrets. What do you think it is? Look at how I'm dressed. The dossier contains photos of candidate Morty with his eye patch, revealing he's evil Morty from season 1. Campaign manager, Morty tries assassinating him at a campaign event, only wounds him. Bodyguards tase campaign manager Morty. Candidate Morty survives, wins the election, becomes President Morty. Campaign manager Morty gets dragged to an airlock, beaten up, trying to explain President Morty is evil Morty. Bodyguards don't care. Yeah, well, no, Morty seems like a president. They ask if he knows President Morty won. Campaign manager Morty's face falls. He won? Bodyguard. Yeah, it was a blowout. Other bodyguard. We hardly call it a blowout. It was almost close enough to trigger a recount. First bodyguard. Jesus, what are you? Joke security now too. They push the button. Campaign manager, Morty gets sucked into space with his dossier. Nobody reads the evidence. The truth dies in a vacuum, literally. Cop Rick gets released from interrogation. Officer Rick say his case was reviewed. He's free. But he violated codes. New department, new codes, new Citadel. President Morty's reforms mean Cop Rick isn't punished for killing his corrupt partner. President Morty meets with the Shadow Council of Ricks, secret corporate oligarchs, who actually run the Citadel. They're getting haircuts in a fancy hall. Rick D. Sanchez III is there, the simple Rick's owner. Garment District. Rick speaks. We were saying, President Morty, that we don't care who sits in that seat. A Rick, a Morty, a goddamn Jerry, doesn't matter. We've been running the Citadel since before the council, and you'll find that we're still running it now. President Morty asks if Garment District Rick speaks for everyone. He's holding a mirror, getting a haircut. 7 Ricks, including Rick D. Sanchez III, raise their hands. President Morty snaps his fingers. Officer Ricks immediately shock laser all 7 to death, leaving only Steve Jobs, Rick, and good-looking Rick alive. Barber Rick keeps cutting hair like nothing happened. President Morty asks the survivors, "Is that enough off the top?" They beg. Yes, goddamn yes. President Morty gives a monologue. This seems like a good time for a drink, and a cold, calculated speech with sinister overtones. A speech about politics, about order, brotherhood, power. But speeches are for campaigning. Now is the time for action. The episode ends showing dozens of corpses floating outside the Citadel in space. Cop Morty, Big Morty, Rick D. Sanchez III, Investigator Rick, Campaign Manager Morty, others. For the damaged coda, plays same song from Season 1's Evil Morty reveal. Documents float among bodies showing photos of evil Morty with his eye patch, revealing he controlled everything since the beginning. There's a full economy with businesses. Cafe Sanchez, Morty Mart, Citadel Morning News, with Rick D716 and Rick D716B as anchors, who clearly despise each other. Campaign manager Morty tries hailing a cab but gets passed over for a Rick in a business suit, showing casual discrimination baked into daily life. There's a train system where commuting Ricks all pull out flasks simultaneously and drink. Rick J22 looks out the window, sees a wealthy Rick in a flying car enjoying sardines and champagne. He sighs. The wealth gap is visible from public transit. The Citadel society is late-stage capitalism, except everyone's the same person, so you can't blame individual bad actors. It's structural problems built by and for the same individual, infinitely repeated. They've got businesses, schools, police, corrupt, factories, exploiting workers, and trapped victims, elections, won by the wrong person, and a ruling class murdered when they challenge the dictator. It's all the structures of civilization without meaning, just millions of people going through motions while the machine grinds them up and calls it progress. Class stratification defines everything. Some Ricks live in luxury, like Rick D. Sanchez III with his factory empire. Others work assembly lines for poverty wages like Rick J22. Some Mortys get assigned to Ricks and have purpose. Others end up in Mortytown rotting. The system pretends everyone has equal opportunity while maintaining strict hierarchies. The ultimate irony. These are people with access to infinite realities who chose this specific hellscape. They could dimension hop anywhere. We know this is possible from other episodes, where characters abandon failing realities for new ones, but Citadel residents can't. They're stuck. The pocket dimension is their only option because everywhere else is dangerous. The Galactic Federation hunts them. Other Ricks might kill them. So they stay in their self-made prison, working jobs they hate, living lives they didn't choose, pretending this is freedom. C137 was right. Anyone still exploring this place is either stupid or held hostage by terrible ideas. The whole Citadel is cosplaying as functional society while being dystopian nightmare. Nothing's hidden. The exploitation is advertised in commercials. The corruption is openly discussed by cops. The oligarchy announces itself before getting executed. It's honesty through hopelessness, transparency through despair. The final joke: Rick C-137 and regular Morty come back from Atlantis, having had an amazing adventure. Rick says that place will never have any bearing over our lives ever again, while the Citadel literally just went through a government overthrow that will absolutely affect them later. That's dramatic irony. That's the show loading a gun in the background while the protagonist insists they're done with guns. Very set up for evil Morty's return in later seasons. Now, let's talk about Rick's first death. And just a quick reminder, subscribe to our channel. We open on Rick C-137, trapped inside his own mind at a Shoney's, which is either the most depressing or most relatable place to be stuck depending on your relationship with affordable breakfast food. He's not actually at Shoney's though. He's imprisoned in a maximum security Galactic Federation facility, getting his brain scanned by Cornelius Daniel, a bug alien who looks like he was designed by someone who really hated HR departments. The Federation wants Rick's portal gun formula, which is basically the interdimensional travel equivalent of nuclear launch codes, except way more useful for avoiding family gatherings. Cornelius Daniel is using a Series 9000 brainalyzer, which Rick immediately roasts as cheap equipment. You cheap insect fucks didn't think I was worth your best equipment? That's like showing up to interrogate Hannibal Lecter with a tape recorder from Radio Shack. Cornelius Daniel admits, "I told the money bugs they should have given him better gear," which confirms that even in the Galactic Federation, purchasing decisions are made by accountants who've never done the actual job. Rick responds to the interrogation by manifesting a butt inside the memory and farting repeatedly. It's hard to tell. He may have manifested some sort of butt, says a Gromflamite worker, which is the funniest sentence ever spoken in a prison. He can do that? Asks the captain. He is the smartest man in the universe, the worker responds. Like this explains butt manifestation as a logical application of genius. That's weaponized immaturity. That's using your IQ to create flatulence. Very 12-year-old humor delivered by someone who could probably cure death if he felt like it. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jerry's thriving under alien occupation, because of course he is. The Galactic Federation taking over Earth. Best thing that's ever happened to this family. I just got my 6th promotion this week, and I still don't know what I do. That's every middle manager ever. Jerry's finally found his people. Everyone gets paid in pills now, which is definitely not a commentary on pharmaceutical industry practices. Summer's the only one upset about this, yelling, "Grandpa Rick wouldn't put up with this." Beth shuts her down. "Stop saying his name. He abandoned us." But Summer won't let it go. She drags Morty to the garage, looking for secret labs and laser guns. Morty tries talking her down with a brutal speech about how Rick bails on everybody, how he bailed on Beth when she was a kid, how he bailed on Tiny Planet, and most importantly, he bailed on you. Then Morty tells Summer if she wants the grandpa who won't let her down, grab a shovel, because the one that won't let you down is buried in your backyard. Summer immediately starts digging up Cronenberg Dimension, Rick's grave, which was not the intended takeaway from that speech. You're right. No, I'm not right. I was using ghoulish overkill. They dig up the corpse, which leads to their robot butler Conroy trying to confiscate it as illegal technology. Then they accidentally portal to the Cronenberg Dimension, where their feral alternate family tries to kill them because Summer stinks of Rick. That's when guard Ricks show up, detect the compromised portal gun, and explain they'll dispatch SEAL Team Ricks immediately to break into the prison holding C-137. Summer celebrates. Then the guard Rick finishes, and assassinate him. Buna. Summer's face falls, which is the perfect encapsulation of council policy. We'll rescue our guy by murdering our guy. Back in Rick's mind, Cornelius Daniel is trying to access the memory of Rick, inventing the portal gun. Rick keeps stalling by staying in the Shoney's memory, which is safe, comfortable, so Shoney's. Eventually, he gives in and takes Cornelius Daniel to the day it all began and ended. The moment that changed everything. They end up at a McDonald's drive-thru in 1998 where Rick orders McNuggets and asks for as much Szechuan sauce as you're allowed to give. He explains it was a promotional sauce for the Disney film Mulan. It was delicious. Then they discontinued it. This is the only place we're going to be able to try it, is in my memory. This is Rick using childhood nostalgia as a stalling tactic during a brain scan. I'm being tortured, so let me tell you about condiments. Cornelius Daniel points out, Rick, you're doing this bit while your brain is melting, which is valid criticism. They finally get to young Rick in his garage, wearing blue pants, working on normal science. Another Rick appears through a portal. It's Rick Prime, offering him portal technology. Imagine doing anything you want, then hopping to a timeline where you never did it. The infinite Rick, a god. Young Rick says, pass. Rick Prime is shocked. Bro, Ricks don't pass on this. Who do you think you are? A different kind of Rick, I guess. Rick Prime responds, well, we'll see how long that lasts, and portals away. Young Rick tells his wife Diane, I just took a long look at myself, and I don't think this science thing is gonna pay off. Diane suggests they get Beth and go for ice cream. That, Diane, is the last great idea that will ever be had in this garage. Then a blinking ball drops through a portal. It beeps. Young Rick screams, no. It explodes, killing Diane and Beth instantly. Cornelius Daniel, eating McNuggets and dipping them in Szechuan sauce, says, wow, this sauce is fucking amazing. His timing is spectacularly terrible. Your family just died, but these nuggets hit different. Young Rick does the math, builds the portal gun right there. That's the 3 lines of math that separates my life as a man from my life as an unfeeling ghost. Cornelius Daniel uploads what he thinks is the formula, but Rick reveals it's actually a virus giving him full control over the brainalyzer. True, but you can alter anything you want about a totally fabricated origin story. The Shoney's was fake, the memory was fake, possibly the whole Diane backstory was fake. We still don't know for sure, even seasons later, which is very trust nothing this show tells you about Rick's past. Rick transfers his consciousness into Cornelius Daniel's body, walks out casual as hell. Another day, another dollar. Am I right, great insect creature, or what? He gets congratulated by the captain, who asks why Rick turned himself in. Rick, as Cornelius suggests, it's possible Rick knew he'd be interrogated at this facility, where we not only keep our most wanted, but our most sensitive data, then asks for the level 9 bathroom access code. A worker starts giving it when SEAL Team Ricks burst in. Yeah, SEAL Team Ricks in the house. They're here to assassinate C-137 per council orders. Rick transfers his consciousness into one of them, Rick D-99. I'm bummed I didn't get to give that insect dick a test drive. The other SEAL Team Ricks reveal they have Morty and Summer as prisoners on the Citadel. Rick shoots them all dead. Not only is my plan screwed up, I also forgot how to improvise. He fights his way through the prison, body hopping through various Ricks, until he ends up as the commander-in-chief of the Citadel's militia. This is the kind of identity theft that requires killing yourself multiple times. I'm my own worst enemy, but also my own best disguise. He orders them to blow up the Rick he just left. He's a spy. Blow him up. I'm gonna go take a shit. Going to take a shit becomes his catchphrase this episode, which is consistent characterization, honestly. As commander-in-chief, Rick walks into the teleportation room. A worker asks what he's doing. This area is for teleporting the entire Citadel to somewhere else, using only buttons and dials. Rick responds, yeah, well, it's a bad idea to have it designed that way then, isn't it? Then he presses buttons and dials, which is like if nuclear launch systems were just labeled buttons that anyone could press, which honestly, they might be, and that's terrifying. The Citadel teleports directly into the Galactic Federation prison. 2 massive structures materialize in the same space. Physics doesn't like this. The Citadel and prison collide, merge, explode, implode, all simultaneously. What the fuck? We just teleported into a galactic federal prison, says a worker, which is understating the situation. This is like parallel parking, except you parked inside another car, and both cars are space stations, and millions of people just died. Council chambers are mid-trial, with Morty and Summer, when reality breaks. The room shakes. Debris falls. Lawyer, Morty yells, order in the court. Whoa, what the hell? Oh my god. Ricks and Morty start screaming. Hammerhead Morty gets sucked into space. Random Ricks grab onto things. The entire Citadel is embedded in a Federation prison in Federation space, which means the fortress built to hide from the Federation is now in the Federation's backyard. We've imported the enemy directly into our safe space. Quantum Rick panics. The Citadel's been teleported to Federation space. It's doomed. This has to be C-137, you guys. What are we gonna do? You know he's coming for us. Rick 4 tries staying calm. Alright, calm down. We have his Summer as a hostage. Obviously, I get her. You guys play Rick, Laser, Scissors for the Morty. They're dividing hostages through rock, paper, scissors, while their civilization collapses around them. Very Titanic if the band was arguing over who gets which lifeboat. Rick shows up in his stolen quantum Rick body. Payback. Shoots all the council members, except those holding Summer and Morty. Summer recognizes him somehow. Grandpa Rick. Duh! He rips off the uniform, shakes his hair into normal Rick style. Very Superman phone booth energy. Rick 4 threatens to kill Summer. Rick says he came to kill them. That's not even my original Summer. Summer's face falls. Oh my god, he's not bluffing. He's not bluffing. Rick explains the tactical situation with cold precision. 20 yards, 9-gauge plasma pistol. First shot liquefies Summer's insides and injures Rick 4. Second shot adds recoil. His risk is minimized if he waits for Rick 4 to shoot Summer, which I'm encouraging you to do. Summer yells, "What the fuck?" Rick offers a quicker death if Rick 4 releases her. Or let her go, which I will reward with a quicker death. Because you love her. Because it's incentive for you to give me my cleanest shot, which will be your least painful death. That's game theory meets hostage negotiation. Very Nash equilibrium, but your granddaughter is the variable. Morty can't take it. Shoots Rick with a gun Rick gave him earlier. Who's stupid now, bitch? Summer panics. Morty, we just got him back. Then Rick shoots Rick 4. Good job, Morty. Let's go, kids. It was a fake gun. Oldest Rick trick in the book. Morty claims he saw the note saying, "Fake gun, shoot me in standoff." He didn't see any note. He just got lucky shooting Rick at the right moment. Very accidentally doing the right thing for completely wrong reasons. Rick accesses level 9 systems and changes a 1 to a 0 in the Federation's centralized currency code. The Blemflark goes from being worth 1 of itself to 0 of itself. The entire galactic economy collapses instantly. The Federation president tries deploying militia, but can't pay them. A worker asks, "Who's paying me to yell at this guy?" Another responds, "I can answer that, for money." The president shoots himself in the head. Everyone starts fighting over clothes because pants are the new currency. He who controls the pants controls the galaxy. Very Weimar Republic hyperinflation, but make it aliens and immediate. Back on Earth, the Federation collapses in real time. Jerry's crawling through chaos. I just kept crawling, and it kept working. Rick shows up at the house. Guess who dismantled the government? Jerry puts his foot down. No, 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 no. Foot down time. Tries giving Beth an ultimatum. It's him, or me. There's a beat of silence. Rick leaves for the garage. Seems like you guys need some privacy. Beth follows him. Jerry's going to spend some time divorced. Rick pretends to be sorry. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, sweetie. I hope I had nothing to do with that. Beth reassures him it's not his burden to bear. This is going to be good for Jerry. For everybody. They're both lying to each other. Very mutually agreed upon delusion. Very family bonding through enabling each other's worst decisions. Rick gives Morty the real explanation in the garage. He threatened to turn me into the government, so I made him and the government go away. I've replaced them both as the de facto patriarch of your family and your universe. Your mom wouldn't have accepted me if I came home without you and your sister, so now you know the real reason I rescued you. I just took over the family, Morty. Then he reveals his true motivation wasn't avenging his dead family. That was fake. I'm driven by finding that McNugget sauce. I want that Mulan McNugget sauce, Morty. That's my series arc. If it takes 9 seasons, I want my McNugget dipping sauce. Season 9 more seasons, Morty. 9 more seasons until I get that dipping Szechuan sauce. For 97 more years, Morty. I want that McNugget sauce, Morty. It's the most absurd mission statement in television history. I toppled 2 governments and destroyed a civilization for discontinued fast food condiment. Whether he's serious or lying again is unclear, which is very Rick. Millions dead across both the Citadel and Federation. The Council of Ricks is gone. The Citadel survives, but damaged. Half its population vaporized in the collision. They transition to democracy because nobody knows what else to do when your oligarchy dies, screaming in a prison merger. This sets up everything that happens in the Ricklantis mix-up later. In the Rick Shank Rickdemption, Rick solves prison by importing the prison into his enemies, which is the most Rick solution possible. Don't break out, just destroy everything from the inside. Don't escape. Make escape irrelevant by collapsing both systems simultaneously. It's elegant, efficient, and killed millions of people as collateral damage, which Rick considers acceptable losses for getting home and obtaining sauce. Now let's jump to Never Ricking Morty, which is pure meta-commentary about what the Citadel represents narratively. The episode is about Rick and Morty trapped on a literal story train that's a literal literary device, quite literally metaphorically containing us. It's an anthology of vignettes where various aliens tell stories about Rick, all obsessed with him, which is the show acknowledging its own lore obsession. Rick explains, it's not a real train, it's a story device. When Morty asks if it's a simulation, Rick says, worse, an anthology. The train represents serialized storytelling, the kind of narrative structure the show usually avoids. Rick hates it because, if we wanted one-offs, we'd do interdimensional cable, not some uptight, overwritten. He can't finish because the show is literally forcing them into a narrative structure. The villain is Storylord, a meta-narrative entity who looks like he does CrossFit. He's like a Matrix space, Frasier, Morty describes. Storylord represents serialized storytelling, mythology, the burden of continuity. He gives a speech about spiraling through the multiverse, burping semi-improvised dialogue about how nothing matters, so we may as well pull out our dicks and rub them on Fate's glaring teeth, like we're brushing Fate's teeth, but we're using your gross, dirty dick. That's Storylord criticizing Rick and Morty's episodic structure, its nihilism, its nothing matters philosophy. He's upset that Rick has no rules, that he can teleport and bypass narrative structure. Nobody's stopping you. Storylord responds, true. Not anymore. He's taking control of the story, forcing Rick and Morty into narrative beats and character arcs. Storylord tries draining Rick and Morty's potential to fuel his anthology. He shows them rejected storylines. Aberdolf Linkler? I thought you were dead. I'm very much alive, and I need your help. Rick panics. Shit. He's taking the good stuff, Morty. These are canon storylines that could have been but weren't, alternate continuities floating in narrative limbo. Is any of this canon? Morty asks. It could have been, Storylord responds, which is the show acknowledging all the story ideas they've rejected or abandoned. Rick and Morty escape by telling a Christian redemption story where they accept Jesus Christ, my best friend and personal savior, Jesus Christ. Morty's confused. You don't believe in God, but he believes in us, Morty. They pray together. Storylord is horrified. No, this sucks. Stop, you guys would never do this. They trap Storylord in the Bible, which Rick calls every writer's hell, because it's the ultimate anthology, thousands of years of serialized storytelling, with infinite interpretations and no clear narrative structure. The episode ends with them back home. Morty bought Rick a story train toy from the Citadel of Rick's gift shop. Rick loves it, but not for the reason Morty thinks. You did the most important thing. You bought something, with money. God, I love money so much, Morty. He gives a speech about how Morty's only purpose in life is to buy and consume merchandise. You didn't ask questions or raise ethical complaints. You just looked straight into the bleeding jaws of capitalism and said, yes, Daddy, please. It's the show breaking the fourth wall about merchandising, about how the Citadel exists partially as a merchandising opportunity. The story train toy comes with car after car of enemies, lovers, and Goombie, all grappling with the nature of who you truly are. The commercial at the end says, buy it ironically, buy it sincerely, just buy it. Not buying it is an act of buying it. That's post-ironic capitalism. That's the show admitting it's selling you toys while mocking you for buying them, while also genuinely wanting you to buy them. The Citadel represents everything the show mocks: serialization, mythology, canon, merchandising, lore obsession. But it's also everything that makes the show successful: recurring characters, ongoing plots, world building, things you can make toys of. Never Ricking Morty is the show's most honest moment about the Citadel's purpose. It's a narrative device that lets them do anthology episodes and serialized plots simultaneously. It's a merchandising opportunity disguised as social commentary, disguised as science fiction. Storylord says Rick and Morty just do semi-improvised dialogue about how nothing matters. But that's not true anymore once the Citadel exists. The Citadel does matter. It comes back in Season 3, Season 5, Season 7, Season 8. It's destroyed twice and rebuilt. It has political arcs and character development and ongoing storylines. It's everything Rick claims to hate but can't actually escape. The episode reveals that the Citadel is the show's prison, not Rick's. The show is trapped by its own success, forced to maintain continuity because fans want it, forced to sell merchandise because corporations want it, forced to deliver both episodic adventures and serialized mythology because that's what modern TV demands. Rick destroying the Citadel in the Rickshank Rickdemption wasn't escape. It was just a temporary inconvenience before it got rebuilt and continued existing. The train in Never Ricking Morty is what the Citadel represents, an unstoppable narrative device that will keep going whether Rick wants it to or not. Story Lord fuels his anthology with limitless potential, just like the Citadel gives the show limitless storytelling potential. But Rick warns, our potential isn't limitless. You'll never break the fifth wall before you've burnt us out. That's the show, acknowledging it can't do this forever. That eventually the lore will consume the episodic adventures, that the Citadel will eat the show alive. But for now, it keeps running. Rick tells Morty, we got all that metacanon shit out of the way, and now we can just be ourselves. Except they can't, because the next shot shows the story train toy on the shelf. And the end credits commercial says, we want you to buy the train. The Citadel exists, will keep existing, because it makes money and drives narrative and gives fans what they want, even when what they want contradicts what the show is supposed to be about. That's the ultimate joke of both episodes. In the Rickshank Rickdemption, Rick solves prison by crashing a city into it. In Never Ricking Morty, the show tries solving its lore problem by acknowledging it's a problem. Neither solution works. The Citadel survives the collision, gets rebuilt, keeps existing. The meta-commentary doesn't free the show from needing merchandising and continuity. It just makes everyone aware they're trapped. Now moving on to Evil Morty's election and Shadow Council. Subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying our video. Evil Morty's election and Shadow Council. After Rick C-137 teleported the entire Citadel into a Federation prison and got the Council of Ricks killed along with millions of residents, the surviving Ricks had to figure out what comes next. Their solution? Democracy. Not because they believe in it, but because nobody could agree on who should be in charge when all the previous people in charge got vaporized in a prison collision. That's like if the British monarchy collapsed and Parliament decided to hold elections purely because they couldn't remember the line of succession. In the Ricklantis mix-up, we see the Citadel's first democratic election for president. The candidates are exactly what you'd expect from a society of narcissistic supergeniuses, a bunch of Ricks with increasingly unhinged platforms, and one Morty that everyone treats like a joke. The Rick candidates include retired General Rick, whose entire platform is more lasers, which is honestly more policy substance than most real politicians offer. There's Juggling Rick, who explains his three-part economic plan while literally juggling 3 balls, then adds a chainsaw for emphasis because why have policy when you can have spectacle? Rick Guilt Rick, Reverse Rick Outrage, and Private Sector Rick round out the field, each representing different flavors of Rick, except they all taste like narcissism, with varying degrees of capitalism. Then there's Candidate Morty, the Morty Party candidate who's running on actual policy ideas instead of gimmicks. The Citadel morning news anchors mock him relentlessly. Rick D716 and Rick D716B laugh while discussing him. That's right, the Morty Party candidate's still in the race, and you just gotta love him for that. Here you see him in his little Morty suit, waving. Isn't that adorable? Little jackass. They're treating a presidential candidate like a child's lemonade stand. Very condescending. Very, we're reporting on this election but also making it clear, this Morty has 0 chance. They even fake his audio. Yeah, I think we actually have the audio for his speech here. Aw, geez. Aw man, I'm gonna lose the election and stuff. Both anchors laugh. They just made up a quote, put it on the news, and nobody cares because journalism is dead even in pocket dimensions. That's Fox News level fact-checking. That's making up quotes and broadcasting them as real. We've decided what the narrative is, and we're sticking to it. Campaign manager Morty watches this disaster unfold and tries to pull candidate Morty out of the race. We had a good run, sir, but I think it's time to pull out of the race. Candidate Morty responds, I feel pretty confident about tonight's debate. Campaign manager Morty is realistic. You shouldn't, sir. You should be terrified. But candidate Morty tells him, maybe you should find a little faith, young man. Campaign manager Morty fires back. You don't pay me to have faith, and we're the same age. That's the funniest thing about Mortys working for other Mortys. They're all 14, but some have managerial experience somehow. At the presidential debate, things go exactly as expected. Retired General Rick gets asked about the Citadel's financial crisis. His answer, more lasers. The moderator gives him more time to elaborate. He stays silent. Just more lasers, and then nothing else. That's his entire platform. The moderator moves on, which is generous because most debate moderators would press for actual answers. But this is the Citadel, where more lasers apparently counts as economic policy. Juggling Rick gets the same question. First off, can I just say that I think this Citadel is the greatest in the entire multiverse, already pandering. I believe the answer to your question has 3 parts. He reveals 3 balls, and starts juggling while explaining education spending needs to increase. Then adds defense spending for balance. Now he's juggling all 3 balls. And that's how you run a Citadel. He catches them all, bows, the crowd goes wild. He didn't actually answer the question, he just juggled and made vague statements about spending, but it plays great with focus groups, so who cares about substance? Then it's candidate Morty's turn. The moderator Rick sets him up to fail. Candidate Morty. The number of displaced Mortys is soaring, while Rick's satisfaction levels are plummeting, and the divide between the 2 groups has never been wider. He smirks. Solve that one real quick. The audience laughs. It's a gotcha question designed to make him look stupid. I'm not even pretending to moderate fairly. But candidate Morty doesn't panic. I don't see a divide between Ricks and Mortys. The other candidates immediately mock him. Retired General Rick. Oh, shocker. Then farts. Reverse Rick outrage. I'd like to offer a rebuttal. Also farts. Rick guilt Rick. Gentlemen, I think we can all agree on one thing. Farts twice. Well, came out as 2 things, but you get the idea. Everyone laughs, except candidate Morty. Then candidate Morty drops the speech that changes everything. You guys finished? He waits for silence. The division I see is between the Ricks and Mortys that like the Citadel divided, and the rest of us. I see it everywhere I go. His voice continues as the show cuts to different scenes across the Citadel. I see it in our schools, where they teach Mortys, we're all the same, because they're threatened by what makes us unique. Cut to Morty Academy, where teacher Rick has been making students repeat obedience phrases. Good idea, Rick. This is a great adventure. I love being your new Morty. That's conditioning. The curriculum is literally titled Appreciating Your Rick 101 and other courses about learning to accept disappointment. These kids aren't being taught math or history. They're being taught to be better servants. Teacher Rick explains they'll be transferred to your new Ricks tomorrow, using the word transferred like their equipment. Hopefully, they will be your last. That's acknowledging most Mortys go through multiple Ricks because their Ricks keep dying or abandoning them. Slick Morty has had 5 Ricks die already. I see. So you are top of the class in something. The other Mortys laugh. Teacher Rick just made a joke about how this kid's guardians keep dying violently. That's the school environment. Competitive trauma. Back to candidate Morty's speech. I see it in our streets, where they give guns to Mortys, so we're too busy fighting each other to fight real injustice. Cut to Cop, Morty, and Cop Rick arriving at the Mortytown Locos hideout. The whole Cop Morty storyline from earlier in the video happens during this speech, which means while candidate Morty is talking about systemic violence, an actual cop is about to murder prisoners to cover up corruption. Very on the nose, the system is doing exactly what he's describing while he's describing it. I see it in our factories, where Ricks work for a fraction of their boss's salary, even though they're identical and have the same IQ. Cut to Rick J22 watching this speech on TV in his supervisor's office. This is the moment he snaps. He just watched Cool Rick get promoted over him, despite being identical in intelligence and having 15 years less experience. He's hearing someone finally articulate what he's been feeling. He grabs a piece of machinery, shoots Supervisor Rick dead, and runs to the Flavor Corps to take Simple Rick hostage. The speech is radicalizing workers in real time. Very powerful rhetoric. The revolution will be televised. The Citadel's problem isn't homeless Mortys or outraged Ricks. The Citadel's problem is the Ricks and Mortys feeding on the Citadel's debt. That's calling out the oligarchy directly. I'm naming the enemy, and it's not the poor people you've been told to blame. Rick J22 locks himself in the Flavor Corps with Simple Rick. But I've got a message for them, from the Ricks and Mortys keeping it alive. A message from the Ricks and Mortys that believe in this Citadel to the Ricks and Mortys that don't. You are outnumbered. The debate audience erupts in applause. Campaign manager Morty is shocked. Holy shit. When candidate Morty comes backstage, campaign manager Morty runs up excited. I don't believe it. I can't believe it. Candidate Morty puts a hand on his shoulder. I know. That's why you're fired. Then walks away. Campaign manager Morty's face falls. He just got fired for not believing in the campaign, which seems harsh but makes sense when you consider what candidate Morty is actually planning. He can't have doubters around. Juggling Rick immediately offers campaign manager Morty a job. Sounds like you're looking for work. I can offer you a very enticing compensation package. Pulls out 3 juggling clubs. First, let's talk benefits. Even the rejection comes with a job offer from a competitor. Very cutthroat political consulting. The news reports that candidate Morty has soared to the top of the polls after his debate performance. At a press conference, a reporter asks, Morty, what's your original reality, and where's your Rick? Candidate Morty responds, gosh, we moved around so much it's hard to remember. I see every Rick as my Rick. I hope they see me as their Morty. That's a non-answer disguised as inclusivity. Very politician dodging the question. Very, I'm going to respond with sentiment instead of facts. Campaign manager Morty watches this from a bar, drinking. I guess I should have had more faith. Then investigator Rick sits down next to him. He's dressed like a film noir detective, trench coat and fedora. It's not faith you need, it's fear. He slides a dossier across the bar. Campaign manager Morty asks, what's this? Investigator Rick responds, it's secrets. What do you think it is? Look at how I'm dressed. That's great self-aware dialogue. Very, my costume is literally telling you what I do. Campaign manager Morty opens the dossier. Inside are photos of candidate Morty wearing an eye patch. Evil Morty from season 1. The Morty who controlled evil Rick and framed C137 for 27 murders. Campaign manager Morty's face goes from shock to horror. He's realizing the person he worked for, believed in, campaigned for, is the most dangerous Morty in the multiverse. At a campaign event outside Hard Rick Cafe, candidate Morty is greeting crowds. A plumber Rick gets excited. I'm a plumber, sir. I'm a Rick, and I'm a plumber. Candidate Morty responds, that doesn't sound like Rick work. You didn't come to the Citadel to be a plumber, did you? I sure didn't, sir. Then, a Rick holding a baby approaches. Mr. Morty, I cloned myself, so you can kiss me as a baby. Candidate Morty kisses the baby Rick. Everyone cheers. That's peak political theater, kissing babies, except the baby is also a grown man who cloned himself for this moment. Very, I wanted to be part of history so badly I performed rapid cloning. Campaign manager Morty approaches through the crowd. Hey, did you end up getting a new job? Campaign manager Morty shakes his hand, then pulls out a laser pistol. Yeah, I did. Assassinating you. He shoots candidate Morty in the chest. Bodyguard Ricks immediately tase campaign manager Morty. He's screaming, convulsing from electricity. Candidate Morty falls bleeding but says, I'm okay, then passes out. He survives the assassination attempt, which makes sense because campaign manager Morty used a laser pistol instead of something more lethal. Maybe he hesitated, maybe he couldn't bring himself to use a weapon that would definitely kill, or maybe evil Morty accounted for this possibility. Campaign manager Morty gets dragged to an airlock, beaten up, desperate to explain what he knows. He gotta be stopped. He couldn't be allowed to win. Shows his campaign badge to the bodyguard Ricks. I worked for him. I was his campaign manager. That Morty is not what he seems. The bodyguard Ricks don't care. Yeah, well, no Morty seems like a president. Campaign manager Morty's face changes when he realizes he won? Yeah, it was a blowout. The airlock door closes. Campaign manager Morty holds up the dossier, trying to show them the evidence through the window. They push the button. He gets sucked into space along with all the documents. Nobody reads them. The truth literally dies in a vacuum. The bodyguard Ricks have a casual conversation about whether it was actually a blowout. We hardly call it a blowout. It was almost close enough to trigger a recount. Jesus, what are you? Joke security now too. They just executed someone and immediately moved on to arguing about semantics. Very, murder is so routine we can bicker about vocabulary afterwards. Meanwhile, President Morty meets with the Shadow Council of Ricks. These are the real power brokers, the oligarchs, who actually run the Citadel. They're all getting haircuts in a fancy hall. Very casual. Very, we're so powerful we can conduct shadow government business during our grooming appointments. Rick D. Sanchez III is there, the simple Rick's factory owner who murdered Rick J22 earlier. Steve Jobs, Rick, is also there, eating a simple Rick wafer cookie, which is corporate synergy. One oligarch consuming another oligarch's exploitation product. Garment District Rick speaks for the group. We were saying, President Morty, that we don't care who sits in that seat. A Rick, a Morty, a goddamn Jerry, doesn't matter. We've been running the Citadel since before the council, and you'll find that we're still running it now. That's we're the deep state, said explicitly. Very why hide the conspiracy when we control everything anyway? They're telling the new president directly that he has no actual power. President Morty asks, does he really speak for everyone here, through his mirror, while getting a haircut from Barber Rick? Well, I think it's important to be clear. Raise your hand if he speaks for you. Through the mirror's reflection, 7 Ricks, including Rick D., Sanchez III, and Garment District, Rick raise their hands. President Morty snaps his fingers. 2 Officer Ricks immediately shock laser all 7 to death. The lasers hit them, they scream, they die. Steve Jobs, Rick, and good-looking Rick are left alive, the two who didn't raise their hands. Barber Rick keeps cutting President Morty's hair like nothing happened. Ultimate professional or ultimate coward? Probably both. President Morty asks, "Is that enough off the top?" The surviving Ricks beg, "Yes. Goddamn yes. Yes, it's great." He responds, "Good," then pours himself brandy from a fancy decanter. 7 corpses are being dragged out by Officer Ricks, while President Morty enjoys top-shelf liquor. Very mob boss energy. Very Tony Soprano, if Tony was 14, and also controlled an interdimensional government. President Morty walks to the window overlooking the Citadel and gives a monologue. This seems like a good time for a drink, and a cold, calculated speech with sinister overtones. A speech about politics, about order, brotherhood, power. But speeches are for campaigning. Now is the time for action. That's every dictator's playbook. Campaign on hope, govern through violence, consolidate power immediately before opposition can organize. The show cuts to scenes of the new regime taking over. Morty divided by Rick banners cover old Rick emblems on buildings. Cop Rick puts on his new police badge, having been released without punishment for killing his corrupt partner because new department, new codes, new Citadel. Fat, glasses, and Lizard Morty work in new uniforms at the Mega Fruit Farm. Their lives changed because the school curriculum is changing, which they think is because Slick's wish came true, when really, it's because evil Morty is consolidating power. Officer Ricks dragged the remaining dead Shadow Council members to airlocks. The final scene shows dozens of corpses floating outside the Citadel in space. For the damaged coda by Blonde Redhead plays, the same song from Evil Morty's reveal in Season 1. Bodies float in zero gravity. Cop Morty who murdered prisoners, Big Morty the crime boss, Investigator Rick who tried to expose the conspiracy, Campaign Manager Morty who tried to assassinate the president, the 7 Shadow Council members who thought they could control him, and more. All dead, all floating, all testament to Evil Morty's efficiency. Documents float among the bodies, photos of Evil Morty with his eye patch, controlling Evil Rick like a puppet, evidence of his true identity, proof that everything was planned, but nobody's reading them. Nobody's investigating. The truth is literally out there, floating in space, and nobody cares, because the people who might have investigated are all dead. This is where Edge of Tomorty, Rick Die Rick Pete becomes relevant. That episode introduces death crystals, which show you how you're going to die based on your current actions. Rick explains to Morty, your future stems from your present, which, if you're living right, keeps changing. The crystals show possible futures that shift based on present decisions. Truth is, anyone that knows how they're definitely gonna die is either boring as hell or about to get shit. Rick uses them in combat. They show you when the other guy's reloading. He looks at the crystal and says, certain death, certain death, certain death, uncertain death, while dodging fire. Definitely gonna get shot by this guy. This is totally my fate. Nothing I could possibly do. Okay, now. Not so much. He demonstrates that the crystal shows multiple possible deaths based on different actions. Change your present behavior, change your future death. It's probability visualization, very quantum mechanics, meets fortune telling. When Morty steals a crystal and uses it to guide his decisions, he sees thousands of possible deaths. The crystal shows him dying in countless ways, but eventually he finds one path where he dies old with Jessica. I want to die with Jessica. He becomes obsessed with following that one path, making every decision based on what the crystal shows will lead to that specific death. This leads to him accidentally killing Rick, surviving a police manhunt, getting put on trial, somehow becoming a folk hero, and nearly destroying the world before Rick comes back to life through clones. The crystal shows Morty that if he says certain phrases, does certain actions, follows certain paths, he'll die old with Jessica. Even random nonsense phrases that happen to match what a judge's dying husband said. I will always remember our time in Peru, Your Honor. The judge cries, declares him innocent, because Morty's crystal-guided word salad coincidentally matched her late husband's last words. It's not magic, it's statistics. Given infinite universes and branching timelines, sometimes random chance aligns perfectly. Here's where it connects to Evil Morty. If death crystals show all possible futures based on present actions, and if Evil Morty had access to similar technology or understood the principle, he could theoretically map out every possible path to power. The death crystal doesn't just show one future, it shows thousands simultaneously. Morty sees himself dying in every possible way at once, then picks the path he wants and follows it exactly. What if evil Morty did the same thing, but instead of avoiding death, he was pursuing power? What if he somehow knew that framing C-137 would lead to his arrest, which would lead to the Council's exposure, which would lead to the Citadel's democratization, which would create an opportunity for a Morty candidate? The precision of his plan suggests he knew every step, anticipated every response, accounted for every possibility. In Edge of Tomorty, when Morty uses the crystal to guide his actions, he does things that seem random but lead to specific outcomes. He crashes a spaceship, accidentally kills Rick, survives through impossible coincidences, all because the crystal is showing him which actions lead to his desired future. Evil Morty's election campaign might be the same thing. Every speech calculated, every public appearance timed perfectly, every response to every event predetermined because he's already seen how it ends. The episode shows visions of the Council appearing in Death Crystal futures. Hologram Rick shows Morty. Councils reach across dimensions, multiple timelines where Council maintains power. The crystals can show not just individual deaths but systemic futures. If evil Morty understood this, he could see every timeline where the Council stays in power, every timeline where Mortys remain oppressed, and more importantly, every timeline where he successfully takes control. Evil Morty's plan required precision that seems impossible without foreknowledge. He had to control evil Rick in Season 1, frame C-137 for 27 murders, blend in with Rickless Mortys after escaping, wait for C-137 to destroy the Council, wait for the Citadel to transition to democracy, run for president at exactly the right moment, give exactly the right speech, survive an assassination attempt, and immediately purge the Shadow Council. That's following a script. What if the script came from seeing every possible future and choosing the one where he wins? The Death Crystal shows that futures are mutable based on present actions. When Morty follows the crystal's guidance, impossible things happen. He survives unsurvivable situations because the crystal shows him the exact micro-decisions that lead to survival. Must continue moving in ways that lead to dying with you. He's not thinking. He's following the crystal's guidance like GPS navigation through probability space. Evil Morty might have done the same thing, every decision calculated to maximize his path to power. Fire campaign manager Morty, at the exact moment, his doubt becomes dangerous. Give the debate speech when it will have maximum impact. Position himself perfectly to survive the assassination attempt and use it as martyrdom. Purge the Shadow Council immediately before they can organize resistance. The show never explicitly states evil Morty used death crystals or similar technology, but his success requires either impossible luck or perfect information about future probabilities. Death crystals provide that information. They show you how every possible action branches into every possible future. For someone smart enough to read that data and ruthless enough to follow it exactly, they're a roadmap to any outcome you want. Rick says people that spend their life avoiding death are already dead, but what about people who spend their life pursuing power? If you can see every possible future where you succeed and every possible future where you fail, you just eliminate the failure timelines through your actions. That's what evil Morty did. He saw the one timeline where a Morty becomes president and genocides the Shadow Council and escapes the central finite curve, and he followed that path with absolute precision. The final shot of the Ricklantis mix-up shows evil Morty removing his eye patch, revealing the transmitter that controlled evil Rick, crushing it underfoot. For the damaged Coda plays, he's been manipulating events since Season 1, following a plan that required years to execute, anticipating every move by the Council and C-137 and the democratic process itself. That level of long-term planning suggests either impossible intelligence or knowledge of future probabilities. Death crystals explain evil Morty's success. He's not lucky, he's informed. He doesn't improvise, he executes. He saw every possible future, picked the one he wanted, and followed the crystal's guidance with mechanical precision. Just like Morty accidentally becoming a folk hero by following the crystal to die with Jessica, evil Morty deliberately became president by following whatever path led to consolidating power. The tragedy is campaign manager Morty discovered the truth too late. He had the dossier, he had proof, he tried to stop it. But he was operating in the present, while evil Morty was operating in the future. By the time campaign manager Morty pulled the trigger, evil Morty had already seen that timeline and prepared for it. Survive the assassination, win the election, purge the opposition, kill the whistleblower. All according to plan. All visible in advance if you know how to look. President Morty's final monologue makes more sense in this context. Speeches are for campaigning. Now is the time for action. He's done manipulating probabilities. He's achieved the future he wanted. The Shadow Council thought they controlled him. They didn't realize they were already dead in every timeline that mattered. Evil Morty had seen their deaths long before he walked into that room. He just had to wait for the present to catch up to the future he'd chosen. That's the horror of Evil Morty's rise. It wasn't a revolution. It was inevitability. Democracy was theater because he'd already seen the ending. The election was predetermined because he'd navigated through probability space to the one timeline where he wins. Everyone else was playing politics. Evil Morty was playing quantum chess, seeing every possible move, choosing the path where he's checkmate in 7. And nobody suspected a thing until it was far too late. Because who expects a Morty to be playing 5-dimensional probability manipulation? The entire Citadel assumed Mortys are stupid, are servants, are genetic camouflage. Evil Morty used that assumption against them. While they underestimated him, he mapped every future where they die and he lives. Then he made that future happen. Evil Morty achieved something unprecedented, a Morty in absolute power over Ricks. But the cost was theaters of democracy, manipulated speeches, predetermined elections, dead whistleblowers floating in space, and a Shadow Council purged before they understood the threat. Campaign manager Morty tried to stop it and died for the attempt. The entire plan unfolded with mechanical precision, as if Evil Morty had seen every possible future and simply executed the one where he wins. Everyone else was playing politics while he was navigating probability itself, choosing the timeline where Ricks finally lose to the Morty they never saw coming. Moving on to Rick Murai Jack, the final destruction. And don't forget to subscribe to us. In Rick Murai Jack, we open on Rick doing anime protagonist bullshit in a Japanese port town, fighting owls with crow powers while wearing a witch hat and heeled boots. Rick's been here so long that Morty literally ages himself to 40 years old just to guilt trip him into coming home. That's how long it's been. Rick. This is commitment to emotional manipulation on a Lifetime movie level. Except instead of passive-aggressive dinner conversation, Morty gave himself back problems and a receding hairline. After the two crows dump Rick, they were cheating with Crow Scare, his supposed arch-nemesis. He comes home. Wubba lubba, dub dub, I'm back, pal. They portal to the Citadel to fix Morty's age, and that's when everything goes sideways. The Citadel looks different, brighter, cleaner, with a mascot called Andy, dressed as a red ampersand, because this place wouldn't be home without Rick's Andy Mortys. Rick calls it Glendale, which is somehow worse than calling it fascist. This is the dystopia of brunch menus and boutique candle stores. At the Rebuild-A-Morty store, Build-A-Bear meets Mangala. They reverse Morty's aging by slicing him vertically into 3 pieces. Outside, a deformed Morty crawls from a manhole spray painting "End of Days." Police Mortys wrestle him down. An accidental adult Morty tries helping. A police Morty shoots him dead. The deformed Morty grabs the gun. Death is coming for us all, and the Citadel is a weapon of mass, shot in the head mid-sentence. It's Cassandra from Greek mythology getting the Scarface ending. Dying adult Morty asks if he was influential. Yeah, you had like 7 blogs. Tight. Then he dies. Your legacy, measured in blog count, very millennial death. Secret Service Ricks arrive. President Morty requests you join him for dinner. Rick knows it's a trap, but Morty guilt trips him into going. At dinner, President Morty is charming, makes self-deprecating jokes. Rick immediately draws his gun. There's the reveal. Morty defends the president. Rick puts the gun away. All politicians are nice. President Morty casually mentions his project. Acquired some hands-on labor. It would require less if you were willing to tell me how one might bring down the central finite curve. I've been using slave labor, delivered like asking for a recipe. Rick tries leaving. President Morty reveals he's been scanning Rick's brain since Season 1. The show pauses for Stan Lee. Check out Season 1, Episode 9, Rick Heads. Evil Rick's brain scan was Evil Morty collecting data for this exact moment. President Morty jams the scanner into Morty's neck, downloading memories directly. The horror. Ricks don't just use naturally occurring Mortys, they manufacture them. The flashback shows Ricks identifying Beth's and Jerry's across dimensions, shooting them with love serum darts in cafeterias, engineering meet-cutes in libraries. We see the cloning factory naked, screaming Mortys in cages, sent down slides, helmets brainwashing them with fake memories, then portaled out to replace dead Mortys like printer cartridges. There aren't infinite versions of our grandfather, Morty. He's an infinite smear of one shitty old man, and he's attached to us infinitely through his weakness and our forgiveness. Both Mortys respond simultaneously. Liar. Rick escapes using a literal screwdriver. I'm basically Inspector Gadget. He tests the portal by shoving a guard through. Screaming, blood spurts back. The coordinates were locked to the blender dimension. I only know one man that ever hacked my portal gun, and it turned out it was evil you. President Morty drops the act. Yay, he's all caught up. Elite guards drop from the ceiling. Rick creates Big Boy, a tumor-covered clone that absorbs damage while screaming. Does he like it? He's a metaphor for capitalism, Morty. Big Boy explodes. Rick escapes. President Morty's monologue. Tonight, I do that thing I want to do, with the curve thing. Loudspeakers across the Citadel. Nobody leave, everybody stay. That's Fire Festival energy. A Rick tries his portal gun sucked into the blender dimension, death scream echoing. Another tries, same fate. 2 Mortys, one incinerated by flamethrower, one torn in half by tentacles. Mass panic. The Citadel news headline, we're F number percent KED. Rick and Morty descend underground. They emerge in the portal fluid mines. Deformed Mortys working in darkness, malnourished, mutated. A Rick oversees them with a whip, literal whipping. Wow, I thought my capitalism metaphor was on the nose. These Mortys built the dimensional drive. They're crying, watching portal fluid drain into one massive vat. Auschwitz in the basement, Whole Foods upstairs. Morty demands answers. Did you help build the Citadel? Rick breaks. Here's my fucking downloaded brain, Morty. You want to jump the shark? You want to know my stupid crybaby backstory? The show calling its own reveal, Jumping the Shark. Morty jams it in. We see Rick's actual origin. Diane and Beth really killed by another Rick. Young Rick builds the portal gun out of grief, becomes an arms dealer and serial killer, hunting for the Rick who killed his family. He murders hundreds of alternate Ricks, never finds his target, descends into alcoholic depression. Other Ricks form the council to stop him. Truce. C-137 builds the Citadel, promises to stop killing. Then he returns to his target's universe, meets that Beth, starts adventures with our Morty. Whoa, dead wife? Yes. Now everyone can shut up about it. Lights blink on, evil Morty in a glass pod. He creates a hologram of the central finite curve, a massive spiral of yellow universes. Inside each, Rick's tormenting Mortys. They literally all say that. They all have that excuse. It's part of their system. Oh, it's so hard to be a genius. Couldn't you just die? Well, what are you doing about it? Jack shit. I'm leaving, he explains. They built a wall around infinity, separated all the infinite universes from all the infinite universes where he's the smartest man in the universe. There aren't truly infinite Ricks, just one Rick, duplicated across the finite set, where he's smartest. They built a fence around their egos and called it infinity, the ultimate gated community. Every version of us has spent every version of all of our lives in one infinite crib, built around an infinite fucking baby, and I'm leaving it. That's what makes me evil, being sick of him. Morty asks Rick, did you really leave the crows for me, or did you come back because they dumped you? Rick looks away, silent. There you go, kid. Now you're evil Morty too. Evil Morty activates the dimensional drive. Portal fluid bursts outside. Explosions everywhere. Orange Afro Rick tries using Operation Phoenix, their automatic cloning system. We still got a way out. They're treating suicide as a life hack. Orange Afro Morty shoots his Rick. A pillar crushes Morty. Both wake up in cloning vats. Then the nightmare, rerouted. The vats have blender blades at the bottom. Orange Afro Morty opens his eyes just as he's liquefied. Every Rick and Morty, using Operation Phoenix, wakes up for 1 second before getting blended into fuel. Die, clone, blend. Infinite death loop. They experience death over and over, their liquefied bodies pumped into the dimensional drive. Prometheus getting his liver eaten, but it's powering a weapon. Oh my fucking god. Rick gets trapped under debris. President Morty in a spacesuit steps out. You can come if you want. He reveals he lied about the second seat. That second seat's a toilet. Oh, super dick move. But weirdly, kinda cool to admit it. Geez, you guys really are bred for forgiveness. Rick and Morty escape to Mortyburg. Rick presses disengage. Mortyburg separates from the main Citadel, flying away as everything explodes behind them, for the damaged coda plays. A hole opens in space, sucking them backward. Sign, booster control, must operate with partner. Rick offers his hand to Morty. Together they activate boosters. Rick checks his portal gun. Empty. They watch the Citadel explode. President Morty flies toward the rift, breaks through the central finite curve into actual infinity. He pulls out a golden portal, gun gold fluid, works outside the curve, where regular portal tech fails. Creates a golden portal, steps through, gone forever. Evil Morty achieved escape from Rick's infinite nursery into real infinity, where Rick isn't special. In Jurassic Mort, Season 6, through background details. That mysterious rift in space? Not gone yet. It's probably important. Nobody's investigating. When Rick fixes his portal gun, there are shots of them portaling past floating Citadel debris, massive chunks of destroyed architecture visible from other dimensions. The Citadel that took decades to build, that housed millions, finally died as a tool for someone smarter to use. Evil Morty consumed it, fed every Rick and Morty into blenders to power his escape. Some Ricks died once when portals opened to the blender dimension. Others died infinitely when Operation Phoenix kept resurrecting them into blender blades, thousands of deaths in seconds. The deformed Mortys were collateral damage. The police Mortys died in portal chaos. C. 1, 3, 7, and Morty survived by escaping in Mortyburg, the working class section. The disposable part designed for exploited labor survived because Evil Morty didn't need it. Simple Rick's factory, Cop Morty's cafeteria, all survived by being irrelevant to power. The central finite curve is breached. Universes where Rick isn't smartest are now accessible. Evil Morty is out there in actual infinity, and the Citadel is scattered debris, a monument to narcissism that rose through murder, maintained itself through exploitation, and died through mechanized genocide. Now let's talk about the feral survivors. In Solarix, we open on Rick C. 137 and Morty weeks after Evil Morty blew up the Citadel. They're stranded in the Mortyburg section, floating in space, starving to death. Rick's doing a dramatic voiceover about how this is the end. I thought I was better than this. Dramatic voiceover while stranded in space? I guess when you're dying, the first thing to go is your creativity. That's the show, acknowledging its opening with a tired trope, while doing the tired trope anyway. Very self-aware hack writing. Citadel's gone, and the saucer we escaped in is out of power. They're drinking piss to survive. Been drinking a lot of my piss. Portal gun's still broken. Morty interrupts. Guess that was all part of Evil Morty's plan. Rick's had enough of this. Can we stop flattering this guy? His plan was to monologue and fuck off. He basically threw a tantrum to announce he was quitting Twitter. That's the show's most honest assessment of Evil Morty's escape. He didn't revolutionize anything. He just rage quit, and everyone's acting like it was profound. Rick mentions the extra Mortys went feral. Cut to a Morty getting devoured by other Mortys. Gah, screaming as he's torn apart. Some problems solve themselves. That's Rick, dismissing cannibalism like it's a minor inconvenience. Very nature is healing, but make it horrific. These are the Mortys who escaped with them from the Citadel. They've been eating each other to survive in the wreckage. Full Lord of the Flies, except it happened in days instead of weeks, because desperation moves faster in space. Space Beth shows up to rescue them, tapping on the glass of the saucer. Rick yells at her. We can't hear you. How dumb are. Beth, you're in a vacuum. Sound travels on air, then realizes he's also yelling in a vacuum. She projects a message using her wrist device. Is this a private party, or can anyone join? Rick and Morty immediately roast her for the corny line. Yeah, that's. Wow, really worth it. That was not worth it. It's corny. You, corn, dying of starvation here. Beth types back that when she decided to say it, she didn't know it would be subjected to this scrutiny. They tell her to stop explaining. She's not finished. Beth threatens, maybe I won't rescue you. Oh, real mature. They're having a family argument about joke quality while Rick and Morty are dying. Very sitcom energy during apocalypse. Back on Earth, Rick tries fixing portal travel by resetting the portal fluid. Hold tight, the Earth's gonna shake a bit. He pulls a lever. Green energy spreads from his garage, across Earth, into space, hitting the corpses of Rick's and Morty's, floating in the Citadel wreckage. They all start glowing green. Then Rick, Morty, and Jerry start glowing too. Oh shit. Instead of resetting portal travel, Rick reset portal travelers. Everyone's being sent back to their dimension of origin. Jerry freaks out. Why do I have a reality of origin? Because of the Jerry Bury, the daycare Rick dumped him at in Season 2. Oh, the Jerry Bury. Deep cut. They vanish. Rick tells Summer to plant a beacon in the Citadel ruins so he can find his way back after being sent home. One-way blind hop beacon protocol, then admits there was plenty of time to explain, but he thought it would be more dramatic to rush. Yes, fine. Hindsight is 20/20. Who has ever taken this long to vanish? Cut to Summer preparing for the mission with Home Beth and Space Beth. Summer gets Wolverine claws from Rick's secret basement, because of course he pays her in superhero weapons. Space Beth initially wants to leave, but Summer convinces her. We could, break things, loot stuff. Guess I could loot some stuff. Fine. They head to the Citadel ruins. The Citadel is devastated. Broken architecture floating in space, massive chunks of destroyed buildings, debris everywhere. Figures it's underwhelming, the one time I visit. That's home Beth finally seeing the place Rick and Morty kept talking about, except it's a corpse. They're walking through the ruins of a civilization, very post-apocalyptic tourism, very, I wanted to see Pompeii but it's just rocks now. They reach Evil Morty's launch chamber, where the dimensional drive was. The place is completely destroyed, shattered glass, broken piping, platforms twisted and collapsed, and there are scavengers, alien species Rick and Morty have never shown before, stripping technology from the wreckage. They're strip mining the Citadel's corpse, salvaging whatever drive tech survived the explosion. Very grave robbers, but make it sci-fi. Very one civilization's apocalypse is another species' business opportunity. The scavengers immediately shoot at them. Summer unsheathes her claws. Shit, yeah. She starts slicing scavengers to pieces like she's in an X-Men movie. Space Beth launches homing bullets that are actually her fingers, because Space Beth has finger guns, but literal. Cool, Mom. Home Beth tries helping, but she's terrible at combat. She shoots a scavenger. They scream in pain. Sorry. Shoots again. Sorry. Keeps apologizing while failing to kill them. Space Beth has to finish the job by blowing a hole through their chest. I was gonna do it. Terrestrials. Am I right? Summer's mocking her own mom for not being good at murder, which is either character development or deeply concerning. They plant the beacon in the drive chamber ruins. All right, pin dropped, Grandpa. The beacon flashes blue, sending a signal through dimensions. The massive hole Evil Morty tore in reality is still there, a rift in space where the central finite curve used to be sealed. It's not healing, it's permanent. Evil Morty's escape route is now a wound in the multiverse that's never closing. Very Chernobyl, except instead of radiation, it's leaking alternate realities. Rick receives the signal while trapped in his origin dimension, his dead wife and daughter's dimension, the place he's been avoiding for decades. He's built himself an AI version of Diane that haunts him. I guess you predicted you might. That's where haunting comes in handy, huh? Rick admits he built her to torture himself, which is either peak sad backstory or peak Rick refusing to actually deal with grief by automating it. Meanwhile, in the Citadel ruins, fifth-dimensional predators start showing up, space monsters attracted to the beacon's signal, emerging through the reality tear. They attack Summer and the Beths. Massive creatures with tentacles and multiple heads. Jesus, it'd be cool if you were around more. I don't want to get married. I'm 17. My affection is the wind. Summer's yelling at Space Beth about family dynamics while fighting eldritch horrors. Very therapy session during monster attack. One of the creatures eats both Beths, just swallows them whole. Moms, they're alive inside its stomach, having an argument about parenting choices while covered in fifth-dimensional stomach acid. Sorry for the sitcom fight, and maybe getting us digested. You've got incredible timing. Even being eaten alive doesn't stop them from sniping at each other, which is commitment to their beef. Summer kills the monster. Both Beths fall out covered in goop. Then all the dead monster corpses merge into one massive space beast. And now, we feast. Rick's space cruiser crashes into it. He gets out and sprays it with acid, killing it instantly. This emergency was oversold to me. Rick shows up after they've done all the work, and acts like they were exaggerating the danger. Very Dad arriving after Mom handled the crisis and asking, "What's for dinner?" The Citadel ruins are officially abandoned now. No survivors organizing, no government forming, no Ricks trying to rebuild. Just wreckage floating in space, scavengers harvesting technology, and fifth-dimensional predators hunting through the debris. The deformed Mortys, who built the dimensional drive in darkness, are nowhere to be seen, likely starved to death in the collapsed mines, or eaten by feral Mortys during the initial chaos. The feral Mortys that survived are animalistic now, hunting in packs through the wreckage, cannibalizing anyone they find. They've gone full Gollum, very what isolation and desperation does to a Morty. Rick dismisses one getting eaten like it's natural selection, which is technically accurate but deeply callous, even for him. Portal travel is broken because the dimensional drive was the source. Without it, portal guns don't work. Rick's reset attempt was supposed to fix travel, but instead just sent everyone home to their origin dimensions. But the clones, the Mortys manufactured in the factory, the ones with implanted memories, have no origin dimension. They were born at the Citadel. So when the reset happened, they automatically materialized at the Citadel ruins with no way to leave. They're permanently stuck in the wreckage of their birthplace, which is the most depressing thing the show's done to Mortys, and that's saying something. The Citadel that housed millions, that survived coups and prison collisions and elections and purges, is now a debris field that scavengers are strip mining for parts. The grand experiment in Rick's civilization is over. No rebuilding, no refugees organizing, no phoenix rising from ashes, just a corpse floating in space that opportunistic aliens are harvesting like it's a junkyard. Rick escapes his origin dimension by flying blind into the rift evil Morty created, risking his life because staying in the place his family died is worse than potential death. He navigates through the broken central finite curve, using Summer's beacon, threading through shattered reality to rescue Morty from the Cronenberg dimension and Jerry from whatever random dimension the Jerry Bory sent him to. The final image of the Citadel, ruins drifting through space, silent, empty, except for scavengers and feral Mortys, and fifth-dimensional predators attracted by the reality tear. The monument to Rick's narcissism and the prison built to contain it both dead. No memorial, no survivors telling stories, no one left to care. Just wreckage, slowly dispersing into the void, forgotten except as a salvage opportunity for aliens who never knew what it was. Finally, let's talk about the last attempt. In The Rick, the Mort, and the Ugly, Season 8. Rick C-137 and Morty are collecting salvage from the Citadel wreckage when their ship gets damaged. Calm down, Morty. I'm almost done collecting Citadel wreckage. Morty's fidgets spinning with passive aggressiveness, which is the most Gen Z way to express frustration possible. They need to land for repairs and discover something unexpected. Organize settlements, not just survivors, but communities with infrastructure. Whoa, there's people living here? Are they refugees? Not refugees. Clones. The factory made Mortys with implanted memories who got pulled back during the portal reset. The Citadel was basically a factory farm for spare bodies. That portal reset sucked them all back. But instead of just surviving in wreckage like the feral Mortys from earlier, these clones have built actual towns. They're governing themselves. The ruins have divided into ideological factions. Morty Town on one asteroid, where Mortys are trying to build society without Rick authority. The Rick section on another, where some clones are attempting full reconstruction. This is the Morty part of town, if you know what I'm saying. Rick wants to avoid it, lands in the Rick section instead. They meet homesteader Rick growing corn in asteroid debris. He immediately cocks a shotgun. "What are you doing on my land?" Trying to leave it as quickly as possible. Leave faster. That's space hillbilly energy, claiming property rights on an apocalypse. Rick fixes the ship and leaves. What's that guy's deal? Morty, I can't imagine anything worse than having to know. That's Rick's philosophy, actively choosing ignorance about other people's trauma. Cut to Morty Town. Arcade Morty and Doc Morty, who's not a real doctor, run a general store selling salvage tech. They're building something resembling normal life, commerce, community, cooperation. A customer asks for processors. Doc climbs a high shelf, struggles because he's too short. Come on, very Morty physical limitations playing out in daily life. The customer mocks him. Mortys, huh? You're the worst. Then everything goes to hell. Boss Hog Rick and his gang arrive in trucks, honking horns. Replix. Got one. It's the jackpot, boys. Time to round up some stock. This is a slave raid. They're capturing Mortys like cattle, burning buildings, stealing supplies. We got no code. Burn it all down, boys. That's speed running from survivor to warlord. Very learned nothing from the apocalypse. They ransack homesteader Rick's farm too. He doesn't intervene initially. He's trying to stay neutral, living alone, avoiding involvement. But the slavers steal his equipment, wreck his crops, capture him along with Mortys. They drag everyone to Boss Hog's base, a partially rebuilt section of Citadel, where reconstruction is underway. Boss Hog Rick is magnificent in his awfulness. Overweight Southern Railroad, barren, thick accent, theatrical mannerisms. I was cloned to be the mascot of a Citadel gumbo chain. Get yo mouth round it. That was Big Rick's Gumbo Hutch's slogan, which is the worst restaurant catchphrase in fiction. The chain is dead, the Citadel is dead, but Boss Hog survived and decided this was his chance for power. There ain't no pecking order amongst the trash. He's treating apocalypse as business opportunity, very disaster capitalism. His plan: rebuild the Citadel with himself as dictator. Problem: not enough Mortys for labor. He's captured some but needs to clone more. He can't crack the genetic code. That's when he discovers homesteader Rick's secret. He's not some hillbilly farmer. He's the former head of Morty Replication. He designed the original cloning factory. He created the breeding program. He's personally responsible for manufacturing thousands of Mortys. A Morty cloning scientist? The best Morty cloning scientist. Boss Hogg is thrilled. And from the looks of these boys, he's still got it. Homesteader Rick has been secretly cloning Mortys on his farm and setting them free as penance. Very Oppenheimer, I am become death, except instead of nuclear weapons, it's child clones. He's trying to atone by giving creations freedom, but he's still creating them, still playing God, still unable to stop doing what he feels guilty about. Boss Hogg offers him his old job back. Homesteader refuses. They torture him. He caves. I'll take it. Hit the switch. He activates the cloning equipment and starts mass-producing Mortys. The cycle is repeating before the old cycle even finished. We're getting Citadel 2, Gumbo Boogaloo, somehow worse than the original, because everyone involved should know better. Arcade Morty and Doc Morty are enslaved laborers forced to work construction, building new Citadel from wreckage of the old. It's literally, those who don't learn from history are doomed to rebuild it. Doc Morty confronts Homesteader Rick. So you're not even a clone? What the fesk are you doing with your life? He's asking why someone with free will chooses to recreate the system that enslaved clones. Valid question. Devastating question. The kind that exposes complicity. Homesteader Rick admits he doesn't belong anywhere else. I never said I was a good guy. I hate you. He's self-loathing, but not self-improving. Very, I acknowledge I'm terrible, but won't stop being terrible. Boss Hogg is delighted. See there? I told you he was good beef. Treating the scientist as livestock, poetic since that scientist treated Mortys as livestock for decades. The cloning vats activate. New Mortys emerge, fresh and terrified. Homesteader Rick watches his creations wake into slavery. Something breaks. One new Morty looks at him, and Homesteader Rick sees himself reflected in the Morty's fear. Very are we the baddies moment, except he's always known, and this is the first time he's actually cared. The vat malfunctions. Instead of normal Mortys, it creates one massive Morty monster hulking amalgamation of Morty flesh with multiple arms and faces. The Frankenstein metaphor made literal, very unethical science creates actual monsters. The Morty monster goes berserk, destroying everything, attacking indiscriminately. It's perfect symbolism. Treat people as products long enough, and eventually the product rebels ugly. Chaos erupts. Monster rampaging, Boss Hogg's gang attacking it. Homesteader Rick freeing enslaved Mortys. Morty's with me! He's chosen his side finally. Very Han Solo, I'm not gonna leave without you energy. Arcade Morty doesn't trust him. So, deep down, you super love Mortys? Not really. I'm just really good at making you. That's the most honest he's been. He doesn't love Mortys. He just feels responsible because he's their creator. It's not affection, it's obligation. Firefight across the ruins. Ricks shooting Ricks. Mortys escaping. Monster destroying construction equipment. Western shootout in space debris. Bullets through skeletal buildings. Very Sergio Leone, but everyone's morally compromised. Trafficker Rick tries stealing the last jar of portal fluid during chaos. That jar is the most valuable substance in ruins. Basically oil in a post-oil world. Homesteader Rick confronts Boss Hogg in his command center. Boss Hogg is unfazed. You certainly are a burr in my saddle. Still doing the accent, still playing the character. Homesteader Rick mocks him. You're a joke. I'm whatever I want to be. That's the freedom of life as a clone. You wouldn't know. Someone made you with sex, all those sweaty parts and nipply bits. You disgust me. That's the philosophical core. Boss Hogg argues clones have more freedom, because they weren't born from human messiness. They can become anything. Homesteader Rick represents someone born naturally, who wasted potential, creating slave labor. Both are products of circumstances, trying to justify choices. Boss Hogg is partially correct. Clones do have freedom to define themselves. His mistake is thinking that freedom justifies enslaving other clones to build his empire. Elevator fight. Confined space combat. Boss Hogg reveals his escritoire weapon, a desk gun. Stupidest weapon reveal in the show's history, but it works because Boss Hogg is theatrical above all else. Homesteader Rick kills him. Au revoir, son. Boss Hogg calls him father, as he dies. Technically accurate since Homesteader Rick created him in cloning vats. Very Oedipal, if Oedipus was a gumbo mascot and Laius was a war criminal. With Boss Hogg dead, reconstruction collapses. Enslaved Mortys freed. Partially rebuilt sections fall apart, held together by authoritarian control and slave labor. Very, remove the dictator, and the structure fails. Arcade Morty faces a choice. Take over reconstruction. Build a citadel run by Mortys instead of Ricks. He considers it. Equipment is there, plans are there, labor force is there. They could do it better this time, make it fair. No, it's time to grow up. Arcade Morty realizes rebuilding means becoming what they hated. The Citadel wasn't bad because Ricks ran it, it was bad because it existed. Any version would eventually become oppressive, because concentrating power corrupts, regardless of who holds it. Vary the One Ring, must be destroyed, not redistributed. The Mortys make collective decision. Let it die. No rebuilding, no new society, no monuments. They'll use remaining portal fluid to scatter across accessible dimensions, find their own paths, never cluster together again. No Morty towns, or citadels, or huddling together. They're choosing diaspora over congregation. We survive by spreading out, not gathering. Some Mortys head to dimensions where they can blend in. Others go to uninhabited dimensions to start over. A few stay temporarily to salvage supplies, but they're nomads now, not residents. The dream of Morty self-governance dies before it starts, because they're smart enough to recognize it would create new problems. Very mature decision for 14-year-olds. Very sometimes the healthiest choice is walking away. Homesteader Rick watches them leave. He's freed his creations, and they're abandoning him, which is correct. He offers no objections. Go make some memories that aren't fabricated. That's him acknowledging what he did gave them fake memories, fake childhoods, fake lives. Now they get to make real ones. He doesn't ask to come along, because he knows he doesn't deserve to. C, 137, and Morty leave after retrieving their salvage. They witnessed the failed reconstruction and learned nothing. I think this little dude killed his Rick. They misread the situation completely, assuming Homesteader Rick murdered someone when actually he's living with guilt. Very C, 137, to miss the point while thinking he's solved the mystery. The Western aesthetic is deliberate. It's a frontier story about building civilization from ruins. Except the moral is, don't. The Old West was violent, oppressive, built on exploitation. Recreating it in space doesn't make it better, just moves the crimes to a new location. Boss Hogg wanted to be a railroad baron because he mistook aesthetic for power. He thought the costume made him important, the accent made him authoritative, playing the character would make him the character. Homesteader Rick understood something Boss Hogg never did. You can't build good society on slavery foundation. Doesn't matter if you call them clones, products, biotrash, or workers, enslaving people corrupts the entire project. His attempt at atonement through secret cloning was just creating more victims with extra steps. The only real atonement was freeing them and letting them leave. The Citadel died 3 times. Once when evil Morty blew it up, once when clones abandoned the wreckage as seen in Solarix, and finally when clones actively chose not to rebuild. That third death is most permanent because it's ideological. They didn't just abandon the physical structure, they abandoned the concept. No more gathering in Rick-dominated spaces. No more communities built around serving Rick's needs. No more collective identity as Rick's accessories. Boss Hogg's reconstruction equipment rusts. Homesteader Rick's corn farm withers. The cloning vats power down forever. Future Ricks flying past see wreckage and wonder what happened. Some investigate and find only empty corridors and scattered records. They piece together the story. Citadel existed, fell, someone tried rebuilding. That failed too. Most don't bother investigating. It's just more space junk. The Mortys who scattered never tell new families about the Citadel. Why would they? It's not heritage. It's trauma. Their children, if they have children, grow up not knowing their parent was manufactured in a factory. Maybe that's better. Maybe some truths should die with the generation that lived them. Homesteader Rick stays alone. He tends corn, fixes equipment, avoids passing ships. He's a ghost haunting his own crime scene. Very self-imposed exile. He never tries cloning again. The vats sit empty. That's probably the closest he'll ever get to redemption. The Mortys remember though. The clones who scattered carry memory of what happened, what almost happened again, and what they chose to prevent. That's the real monument. Living people who refuse to repeat the pattern. They're the gravestone for the idea that Rick's civilization was inevitable or necessary. They proved it wasn't by walking away and surviving anyway. The Citadel is finally, completely, totally dead. Not because it was destroyed, it survived that. Not because everyone abandoned it, squatters came back. But because the people who could rebuild it chose not to. That's the only death that matters. When the next generation sees ruins and says, no thank you, we'll build something else somewhere else, and means it. That's it for today. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.